Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode 150. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined once again by my missing son. We found him from a milk carton. His name is Chris Raygun. Chris, how are you today? How's it going?
I've returned.
Welcome back.
I'm good. I sprained my ankle.
Yeah, I've been reading that.
I last saw you, so that's not been fun. But
how'd you do that?
It's really underwhelming. I was literally just going down the stairs.
That sucks.
And I just totally misjudged. You know what it was? I was putting my mask on and somebody else was coming up the stairs. And I was like, oh no, I gotta get my mask on. And it was blocking my view of the stairs. And I thought I was at the end and I just plummeted down. And I felt like my leg had been hit by a car. It's a really weird.
Quite maimed. Yeah,
it's quite an uncomfortable feeling, but
did this person see this happen? Was it also an embarrassing moment?
No, thankfully they were behind me going up. So
okay, cool. So it wasn't a double indignity or anything like that.
No, thank God.
Well, that's good. It's good to see you again, and of course our executive producer Dustin Furman is here with us again this week. Dustin, Hello. How are you today? You look very handsome.
Thank you. I'm doing well. I was telling Chris because I almost wore the same hoodie. And then I didn't, but I was like, it's so easy when you work from home to just throw on another shirt or whatever. But I really do like wearing flannels when it's this type of weather. And I was like, you know what? It's a flannel day. Let's go.
Yeah.
You look handsome. You look fit. Are you trying to grow your beard?
Well, no, I actually so what happened was I went to trim it down. And then I used the first, the guard thing, and I was like, this is not doing anything. So I thought I went one down, but I think I went 2 or 3 levels down, and then almost just completely, pretty much shaved it off. I'm like, well, it is what it is now.
I've done that. That happens. But
so I've lost about 5 to 7 years. Now I'm back to baby Dustin.
You look like a little baby boy. Perfectly round head. Well, thank you all out there for joining us today for Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is an auspicious occasion because it is episode 150. Although I don't think it's that auspicious. It's more exciting. 100, 200, 300. Those are the more exciting things. But thank you for joining us. Chris has to go get his second shot today, so we're recording a little bit earlier. Thus, my schedule is a little bit off because here's what I typically like to do. We record in the early to mid-afternoons typically, and so I get up and I dick around and then I work out and then I shower and then I come and do the show. However, I haven't had a chance to work out or shower yet. Ooh. So I'm still wearing the same shirt I was wearing on Knockback, which will be... So there's going to be a little bit of a continuity here. Even has a hole in the armpit. Look. Check it out. I got the shirt in my freshman or sophomore year of college. It's from Caddyshack, of course.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get into some of the things here that are relevant. Of course, first of all, we must mention Patreon. Patreon.com/laststandmedia. We are well over 11,000 patrons now. We've grown maybe by 10% or so in the last couple of weeks. So I don't know if that's going to last or not. It's okay if it doesn't, but we really do very much appreciate it. Of course, a lot of people are coming into the door because of some interviews that I've been doing recently. Just did a nearly 2-hour interview with David Jaffe, the creator of God of War and Twisted Metal, and people really loved that episode. And we really appreciate it. So hundreds of new people came to join us for that. We hope you stick around because the next episode of Sacred Symbols Plus, which is only for our patrons, of course, will be an interview with IGN's Ryan McCaffrey, an old friend of mine. We're going to talk about games journalism, and I want to talk to him. I'm going to ask him tough questions because I think he'll answer them. So I really want to know what happened with him with that story with 6 Days in Fallujah, and I want to know how everything's going. He's really a preview person, so I want to talk to him about all of that. I'm really excited about that. But thank you all for joining us over on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. We couldn't do it without you at any level you join us. Let's Plays and a second episode of Sacred Symbols Plus are coming because you've hit certain stretch goals. You hit them actually within the same day, which we didn't anticipate. So I wrote a letter to the audience letting them know that we'll begin rolling them out. Not quite in earnest, but this summer. And Dustin wrote here in the document too, join us on Discord. Our Discord is blowing up, so come hang out. Do you have anything to say about that, Dustin?
No, just that at the $5 level, you can join our Discord, which I know a lot of the people that jumped in this week are at that $5 level. The big thing to know, because I get a lot of the messages to the Patreon as well, and I'm seeing a lot of people that they don't know how, which is fine. It can be a little confusing. You have to connect your Discord account to your Patreon account. You do that in the Patreon settings. And then, theoretically, you should be automatically bumped into our server, like, without having to do anything. So you just got to connect those things, and you should be good to go. You can join us on our Discord. It's a good time. Lots of good folks there. That good people, good hangs.
Yeah, you'll find me in the meme channel primarily, posting
Right.
memes. Yesterday, I posted a meme of I want to go look at it because it was pretty funny here. You know the old woman from Home Alone 2, like the bird lady,
the pigeon lady.
Oh,
pigeon lady?
yeah.
There was a picture, like the bottom. What do they call it? Taboola on different websites. I think that's the name for it, where it's like the automatically generated links to other websites. And I saw one, and it was like I had it on my phone, so it was either like in the meme someone made, or it was literally like one of these things that I just snapped at some point. It was Piers Morgan and then the bird lady, and it says Piers Morgan denies that he is the bird lady from Home Alone 2. But if you look at the pictures, I'm not making fun of Piers Morgan, a perfectly normal looking guy, but it looks like the bird lady. He looks like the bird lady.
The second you brought up Piers Morgan, I knew exactly where that was going, because it totally fits, even in my recollection of that movie, having not seen it in ages.
It's very uncanny. So anyway, you can check me out there if you want. We're all on there dicking around. A couple more things. Merch. LastStandMedia.shop continues. Vita is dead. Or Vita means death, rather, will continue. We have 2 new pieces of art. We know now that Vita is done. And that's not a huge surprise. I'm not even going to talk too much about that because we know the store will remain up, of course, for PlayStation Vita games and for PlayStation 3 games, but no new releases after this summer. So we're going to continue with that, which is pleasing. And Alex Bolton wrote into us on Patreon, just like you guys can, says, love me them Lockmort edits. Lockmort continues doing our nice edits. What do you think, Chris, about all these videos that are happening?
I love I love those edits. I have a soft spot for anybody who primarily does editing work, and the fact that people can just take content like our podcast and make it just an incoherent mess. Not that it already isn't, but just make it funny. That's like not easy to do. Like that's like a really like disciplined thing to be able to sit through an entire 2 hours and just like find ways to make it like coherently incoherent. It's like really, really smart and really cool. I love them.
I was thinking about that in terms of, because I often mention to Micah, like when we have TV or YouTube on or whatever, I often think, I'm like, I wish I always just had a connection to a computer that was running and recording anything on my TV, because I always find just funny ass shit. And I'm like, I wish I could just take this 10 seconds of this Karen video and put it up, because it'll get, a lot of circulation, but I'm not that sophisticated. Let's be honest.
Right.
All right, so guys, I mentioned it's episode 150. Now, this is for old school fans of me, this is a somewhat important number in an episode run, and this is where I wanted to bring this next one up. So, you guys will recall, a lot of old school fans will recall that I did a podcast called Podcast Beyond for many years. It still exists. They pretend I'm dead and don't exist anymore, but that was my show for a long time. But it wasn't my show originally. That was a show started by Jeremy Dunham and Jeff Haynes and Chris Roper. And I joined as kind of a guest in like the 70s and 80s during the run of that. And then I did they did episode 100 without me. And then I think I was like more of a regular right after that. But it was episode 150 where I became a member of the team, where I became a member of the show. People will remember this. This was when Greg, Ryan Clements, and I used to do the show. And so I'm going to do the same sort of thing for Dustin today. He knows. We're going to induct Dustin into the show permanently. I think this is a very good move, because I think it is giving us, first of all, people, let me back up. All right, let me back up.
Oh.
The customer isn't always right. There's this cliche, right, that the customer is always right. And I own 2 businesses, and we've all worked. I mean, we all worked and interacted with customers. The customer's not always right? That's a complete cliche. It's nonsense. One of the things that people push back upon when Dustin started to appear on the show is like, well, it's kind of breaking things up, but as we've gone on, we have grabbed so many Dustin believers. I mean, you just have to look at the feedback we get on YouTube, or the feedback we get on Twitter, the feedback we get on Patreon. People like what Dustin's bringing to the show. I like what Dustin's bringing to the show. Chris likes what Dustin's bringing to the show. Thus, he's part of the show. And I feel as if with the opportunity we're having on Patreon now to do a second episode of Sacred Symbols Plus a week starting in the summer, that we have a core unit here that will never really be interrupted, which I like. I hate tuning in the podcast and having just random people on it. It annoys me. And then you'll get all of those sort of interview permutations, the review discussions, all of the deeper conversations on Sacred Symbols Plus. So it's very exciting. Dustin, welcome.
Thank you. I did not know that about Beyond 150.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that a lot.
That is really cool. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, that's cool. But no, I'm very thankful for the opportunity. It's been awesome being on the show thus far. And I like the dynamic we have, because part of like when you started having me on more, Colin, I was like, okay, what do I bring to the table that Colin and Chris, maybe don't provide as much as? And so I've tried to lean into that. And so it's funny, though, Colin, what you said about the customer not always being right. And it's like, it was a little, not that anyone was too mean at first, but seeing some of the feed, like instantly, like, no, we don't want this. And I kind of get that, because I think I would have been in the same position if it was, my favorite show or whatever. But I appreciate everyone who's willing to, give me a shot, and I'm excited. It's right now, Colin, I told you that something feels different in the air right now. I don't know if it's just that, like, obviously we had a huge jump in patrons, but like since we rebranded the company in January, it just feels like it's just exponentially going up in a lot of ways across the board. And so just exciting. I just feel like there's so much optimism, and for us, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I'm very optimistic about not only this show, but just the future of the company and stuff like that. So again, Thank you.
We're in great shape. So yeah, thank you everyone out there. We are now the biggest nerd culture Patreon account in the history of Patreon. So it's a pretty big deal, especially because I founded another one of those companies. No big deal. So it's exciting, and so the whole customer isn't always right thing. I thought it was just a funny thing, because sometimes you just have to trust people. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a long time. I found Chris, right? And we'll remember that Chris. A lot of people were like, "Well, what is this? Like, Chris doesn't know what he's doing." I mean, it's the same thing. And then I'm like, just trust me. Like, give him a chance and let him get into his rhythm, and he did. And then everyone loved Chris. And it's the same thing with Dustin. Just trust me. You don't have to trust me about everything, but trust me on what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing with this.
Yeah.
I
remember when I started, I was like, oh man, I'm like, I was worried that everybody's going to be like, this isn't Greg. I remember that being like a distinct concern really early on. And it was pretty quickly vanished.
Yeah. They're glad you're not Greg. It's no offense to Greg. It's that they don't want, this is a totally different show. They're glad you're not that.
Yeah.
We don't have the positivity and the loudness, let's say, of Greg. Right. So anyway, this is the team now. It's awesome. Congratulations, Dustin. Keep up the good work, Chris, of course.
Thank you.
And let's just get through a few more things here. Just a few more pieces of news. First of all, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which comes out in late June. Previews are up now. I'm not reading them. I'm not looking at any videos, but you can go check them out if you want. All the major websites have them. And then I wanted to give a shout out to our friends at Rainbite, the New Zealand developer that made Reverie, which is a game I really loved on Vita. Their new game, Trigger Witch, is officially announced for PS4 and PS5 this summer, being published by our friends at East Asia Soft, both digitally and physically. John O'Peck, who's a friend of the show and a friend of mine, wrote Trigger Witch, and so I wanted to make sure to give it a special shout out. The game looks phenomenal. It is a twin stick shooter where you play as like a female child witch who uses like amazing guns, like firearms. Chris, have you seen footage of this game?
I did. I just the phrase "female child witch" is like very amusing.
Yeah, it is. Like I'm trying to say, it's like a little girl basically but she uses like these like their whole I don't know coven or whatever. Because I actually have a build of the game. Their whole coven is actually they like use guns. It's cute. It's very funny. It looks awesome. Dustin, have you seen footage?
I'm looking at it now, and I love it just because there's like the old joke of like it's Skyrim with guns. It's not obviously that, but it's just like, yeah, just put a fucking gun in the game. Like, and then that's kind of what it's built around. So I like that.
Yeah, many shout outs to Jono, many shout outs to Rainbite. go check out Reverie, their previous game. It is a very lovely love letter to like Link to the Past, but very short. It's really cute. I can't wait to play this game. I just wanted to give them a shout out. They're great guys. And I actually emailed Jono because, not that he would have anything to do with it, he's not part of the team, he just wrote the game, but I was like, I wish, when I saw East Asia Soft was publishing it as a digital thing, I'm like, I wish you let me know, because we might have been interested in publishing your game, but because it's so good. But I have a build, you're going to love it when it comes out, so Trigger Witch, keep an eye out for that. Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, just wanted to point this out, the PlayStation 5 exclusive, kind of, it's like the Yuffie DLC. We now know that it'll be exclusive to PS5 for at least 6 months. And they also noted in the press release that Part 2 is, quote-unquote, coming along nicely and takes part right after Yuffie's chapter. So I was right about that. And it says that Cloud goes into the wilderness, which we know Cloud will leave Midgar at this point. So very exciting. Not the exclusivity part, I don't care about that. But exciting to know about Yuffie and the deep connection with this. Are either of you going to play this DLC? I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I have to play it. Dustin.
Colin... You listen, okay, some people, I read all the comments. I don't know if people know this, but I read like probably 95% of comments that come through on across everything on Last Stand Media. Whoa. A lot of times people say things that don't make sense, but someone pointed out like, hey, Colin's like, play what you want to play, do whatever you want. And then Colin's like, I want to play the Yuffie DLC. But I'm not going to play what I want to play because of trophies.
But
Colin,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll let you finish your thought. We need to figure out like a 5-step program or something. It's okay. I have no problem with the love of trophies. There's no problem. Chase them to your heart's desire. But isn't this playing what you want to play because of the reasons you want to play it? I mean, isn't it kind of... See,
True?
Isn't this the perfect excuse that I've made? I've concocted the perfect excuse. Because, like, my whole mantra is that you can never judge whatever I'm playing for whatever reason I'm playing. That's basically the mantra I've created. Thank you.
You basically... That. Yeah, that's a very unfalsifiable kind of situation that you put yourself in. It's
a little bit, like, fascistic in a way, isn't it? Like, it's like, yeah, there's no questioning this, El Duce. You know, yeah, it is. You're right. The question is, and this is something people have been bringing up, and it's a compelling point. Will the Yuffie DLC have its own platinum trophy? Because if it does, then it's no problem. It'll be its own list. So then there's no issues playing it on its own on PS5. I can draw my save over and then boot up the new trophies. But if these trophies pop the Final Fantasy VII PS5 trophies, that's first of all going to be against my rule set, which is going to drive me nuts. That'll drive me nuts for years if those end up on my list. It was like when Chris Roper played Metallica, Guitar Hero Metallica on my list on accident on IGN, and I have 3% of the trophies, and that bothered me for several years on my list.
Wow.
Like, I would look at it, I'd be so mad that it was there. So, yeah, it's complete nonsense. Chris, are you going to play the Yuffie DLC?
I gotta, at this point, I gotta restart it again. Yeah. It's been so long. I've been trying, and this is like a problem that I've noticed that I've had. I'll pick up a game, I'll get really far into it, I'll get significantly into it, and then I'll put it down because something else will come up. And I'm specifically trying to practice some discipline right now because I'm trying... We can get into this when we talk about what we're playing, but I'm specifically just trying to finish something, and then, you know, after I'm done, I'll move on. And when this, you know, PS5 proper port comes out, I guess I'll just jump into that because I can't go back. I can't go back to the jitteriness of the PS4 version. I just can't. Sure. It's so noticeable now that I'm spoiled by 60 frames.
Well, we'll see. I'm looking forward to it, or maybe I'm not. We'll have to find out how everything's going there with the Yuffie DLC. But keep an eye out for it. Intergrade only on PS5 for at least 6 months. And the new Part 2, undated, coming along nicely. Wanted to give a quick shout out to Days of Play 2021. So this is kind of a cool thing Sony's doing. You can go to PlayStation Blog to read about it, but it's basically this sort of celebration in phases, and it starts on May 18th. And basically what you do is you sign up with your PlayStation ID, and then you start playing various games, and there are goals to like achieve collectively. So like trophy count, friends list stuff. It's pretty cool. So if you want to participate and play this sort of extra meta game, it takes place in stages, like beginning May 18th and then May 25th, June 1st, and so on. And they have these goals, like it's like, this is how many games you play, this is how many trophies you earn, this is what you get. if you do it. And it's like a whole community thing. So if you want to check that out, please do. And let's see. Oh, I wanted to get what you thought of this, Chris. So Gabe Newell gave a talk to Santa Maria College in New Zealand. This is according to IGN. Gabe Newell, of course, is the founder of Valve, the owners of Steam. And he said he was asked if Valve games or Steam games would be ported to console, and he said, quote unquote, "You will have a better idea of that by the end of this year," end quote. What do you think that means? I feel like this is quite a mysterious situation. I don't know if he's talking about Half-Life Alyx, or is he talking about Steam running on console? I mean, I'm kind of curious, like, what it could be. Some sort of form of Steam? What do you think?
Yeah, it's very weird. I don't foresee Steam running on console, just because that seems like a really complicated... Like, you can't even get these big console manufacturers to agree on crossplay initiatives. So, like, I don't foresee Steam running on a PS5 anytime soon. But I do think there's a possibility of, like, maybe a potentially new orange box, or what I think is more likely, cool. What I think is the most likely thing is that this is to do with Half-Life Alyx and PSVR 2. I think that's what this is getting at. I don't see a reason for them to put, like... First of all, they haven't made anything else in a really long time, so I have a hard time believing what this... They have no jurisdiction over other Steam games that are probably already on PlayStation. Like, there's... I don't know what else he could possibly be referring to, if not the standout release that they've made that is only really compatible, theoretically, with this next-gen VR thing, which seems like it's doing all the right things for Half-Life Alyx to run on it. That was the first thing that came to mind when I saw this.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. I love the idea of another orange box, specifically because PS3 owners will remember the PS3 orange box was really bad. It didn't run right, didn't have trophies and all of that kind of stuff, but the quality of the ports... Thanks, babe. I texted Micah to give me my notebook. Because I had notes for Resident Evil that we need in a little while. But so, Dustin, what are you thinking about Gabe Newell's seeming hint that something might be coming?
I think Chris is most likely right on the money with probably Half-Life Alyx, which initially my gut thought was like, well, they made that game to sell a headset. And... why would they give that up? But at the same time, they're Valve. And so they can just kind of be like, yeah, we've kind of, as we talk about, squeezing the orange. We've already kind of squeezed this orange here on PC. Let's spread it around a little bit. The other thing is, they've been clear through all the PR and stuff for Half-Life Alyx that Valve is interested in doing more things in the Half-Life universe. I'm not saying Half-Life 3, but it's possible. It's certainly a possibility that they're like, okay, yeah, if we do Half-Life 3, every console, same time, go.
Yeah,
who
that
knows?
would be cool.
Or maybe it's something totally different. I just know that they're open to doing more stuff with Half-Life.
I think Half-Life Alyx coming to PSVR 2 is tantalizing, but I also kind of feel like, well, we don't look at Valve and Steam the way we look at PlayStation, because obviously we're a PlayStation podcast, but just reverse what we always say about PlayStation games appearing on Steam being good for PlayStation. Like, I imagine the inverse must be true as well. If you released Half-Life Alyx on PSVR 2 and you're like, well, come on over to us. I mean, it kind of works similarly, I would imagine. Or if you want more Half-Life, then you have to play them on PC, or you can play the shitty PS3 ports or whatever. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. Chris, were you going to say something?
No, I think that's entirely right. I think, like, if you can get people with Half-Life Alyx, which is, like, I think pretty much universally accepted to be the benchmark for VR titles, and people get engrossed in this universe. I haven't finished Half-Life Alyx because my VR headset died, like, halfway through, which is, like, really sad. But I heard it's, like, an amazing story, like, genuinely. And if that's going to entice people to, like, look into Half-Life more, they really only have one option right now, and that's Steam. And I think it's smart.
I didn't even know Gabe Newell was really doing very much right now. Like, you don't see him too much anymore.
Yeah.
So it's cool that he gave a talk. In New Zealand of all places, but he doesn't. He used to be quite vocal, but he's not very vocal anymore.
Wasn't this at like a high school too? It was like some weird, like.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me see. Let me open it back up. Oh, I have it here. No, it's a college. It's Sancta Maria College in New Zealand.
Right.
Well, thank you, IGN, for relaying that. And final thing I wanted to bring up, you guys won't care, although maybe you will, because this is an interesting thing. I tweeted about this the other day. The Mass Effect trilogy, which I think is out by the time everyone hears this on PS4, has a trophy list the likes of which I've never seen before. And it's actually pretty exciting if you're into trophies because it shows a whole new level of capability for what they can do with trophies. So each of the games, not surprisingly, has their own platinum trophy. And of course, the trophy lists are all redone from the originals to include the DLC and to get rid of some of the, especially in the first one, some of the annoying shit in the original Mass Effect. But there is also a list, a fourth list, that it crosses all of the games. And so I was talking to Brian at PlayStation Trophies, who's a friend of mine, and we're going to have him on the show, I think, soon, who's a huge trophy hunter. And I'm like, have you ever seen something like this? And we couldn't name anything like this. The closest that we could get to was the Sly Cooper collection on PS3, which had a fourth trophy list, but it was for a mini game collection. This is basically a transcendent list, like where you can beat. So, for instance, I'll open it up now. It doesn't have a platinum; it's just normal trophies. But like one of them is called Paramour 1: Establish a romantic relationship in Mass Effect 1, 2, or 3. And so, technically, you could establish a relationship in the original Mass Effect, pop the trophy in that list, and then it'll pop the trophy in a second list at the same time. I've never seen that. If you're into trophies, it's totally new. And what I was saying to Brian is that it's on PS4, so it's not even like something the new consoles were able to open up in capability. This is very exciting for future collections if you're a trophy hunter. Imagine a Final Fantasy collection, for instance, with 6 or 8 platinum trophies, plus an entire transcendent list that crosses all of them. It's pretty cool. So I'm stoked about this. I know you guys don't care. I won't even ask you, but
I do. No, I think that is interesting. No, there's a good point, Colin, because you made this. We talked about this last week. The Baldur's Gate game.
Yeah, awful.
That has no platinum.
Yeah, no
It's
platinum
just
at all. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and the thing about is, like, I'm not a trophy hater. In fact, there was once a time when I was going for trophies regularly, but it just doesn't make any sense from like selling your game. I think that's what you said on Twitter. Like, why wouldn't you include a platinum? All you got to do is ask Sony, and some people will not buy it if it doesn't have that. That's like
Definitely
a real thing. So to see EA go above and beyond is like awesome.
Yeah, it's cool because they obviously get it. I mean, they know that trophies are important. They release annualized sports games that have trophy lists that people love. I mean, some of the people really love the Madden trophy list and the NHL trophy list and whatnot. They're cool and they're deep. So they do seem to get it, but I love the idea of that transcendent trophy list. I've never seen anything like that. I don't think anything like that exists anywhere else. So it's cool. I don't know. I saw that and I was amped up because the original, I don't know if you guys know, the rumor originally about Mass Effect Legendary Edition was that it had 1 platinum. And that, I think, came from the fact that list leaked first. And so people were like, oh shit, it's like one folded list. When I heard that rumor, I was like, there's no way they would do that. And I was right. I'm like, there's no way EA would do that. They can't possibly be that stupid. But to the point you were making, I want to bring up the game you had brought up because, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, which was a 2001 PS2 game, released in early of 2001, and then ported in early May of this year to PS4 via Snowblind. They have no platinum trophy. I mean, this is a huge game. No platinum trophy, and then you just get a trophy for beating it on easy, normal, hard, extreme, and then finishing the gauntlet. And you would imagine that this is a cool opportunity to make a trophy list. This is a great opportunity. And a real drop ball. And if you look at I mean, not that it's like huge conjecture, but if you read PSN profiles or Exophase or anything, a lot of people are not buying it because of that. So I'm telling you, trophies matter. They matter. They definitely do. All right, boys, let's get into what we're playing. I guess we'll start with Resident Evil 8, right? 2 of us are playing it. Chris isn't, but Dustin is and I am. Mm-hmm. Caesar Arroyo wrote into us on Patreon and says, hey, Last Stand crew, now that Resident Evil Village is out, I'd like to know how you are liking it so far. I just thought I'd share that I may or may not have injured my hand playing this game without giving too much away. I was exploring a certain house at a point in the story that was giving me so much anxiety. I was gripping my DualSense a little too tight. I didn't feel the pain in my palm and wrist until after I took a break from the game and the adrenaline wore off. I'm eagerly awaiting to see what happens next, but until then, I'm icing my hand. Love the show. It's funny you say that because I busted my hand messing around outside, and so like pressing the L1 button really hurts for some reason. Dustin, what do you think of Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil Village so far?
It's an interesting comment from Caesar here because I've heard about this house. I'm not there yet. The game is kind of broken up into acts, and so as far as I can tell, I think I'm done with like Act 2. But man, this game pretty good. In fact, I think it's really good. It's like the perfect amount of like it's scary kind of, but it's more just like creepy and thrilling at points. And sometimes it's just like stupid scary in a good way, because like from the marketing, there's like werewolf guys and stuff like that, and then there's the the big lady. How do you actually say her name? Do you know, Colin?
Demetrisk, I think.
Demetrisk.
Yeah.
So she specifically that part. I feel comfortable talking a little bit about that because it's been so heavily featured in the trailers. Like you're going around the castle, and she'll just appear at random times, kind of like Mr. X.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they've just like tuned in that AI just right. But I had multiple instances where I'd go through a door and she'd be like, "What's up, bitch?" And it was like just like this like horrifying moment where you're like running backwards and sprinting. And it's different than RE7. It's more like there's way more ammo. There's way more shooting. It's not an action game, but you are shooting a lot more enemies. I don't know if I think right now my gut says I'm still preferring RE7 to RE8, but so far, man. Colin, what do you think about the graphics of this game? I think this game is insanely gorgeous. Like I sit down to play it and I'm like, just like the lighting, the textures, like you look at like a cloth on a table. I was telling Holly as I was playing it, she's like, "Why are you stopping so much?" Like I got to look at this, this carpet. Here, or this wood texture on this wall because it looks so good.
Yeah, I do the same thing. And it is stunning. The game is stunning looking. There are moments where you can't even believe how good it looks. There's a scene when you're coming up a staircase in the castle to like a foyer type area that leads out into different areas with a huge chandelier and like a staircase going up and a fireplace, and it's just the lighting. I guess it's the ray tracing is absolutely nuts. I actually can't believe it. The other thing, not that I'm reading too much about this, that I wrote down in my notes that I needed to talk about was that the game does, at least on PS5, I haven't played it on PS4, but there's no loading. Like the game just plays like all the way through, no matter where you're going. It just never doesn't. I know Resident Evil has always done a very nice job of hiding its loads. Obviously, in the early games, it used to be like the door opening, and all of that. But it's really cool. Like you can go from the castle to the village to other locations, whatever, and it never loads. And I wasn't even realizing it until I kind of became cognizant, and I'm like, holy shit, this is cool as hell. Like we're very quickly going to take this for granted. Like I'm already taking it for granted that like we're just playing in a seamless space. Yeah.
An interesting detail about that is on the Digital Foundry video that it's clear that Capcom took full advantage of specifically the PS5 SSD, because it is, even though it's running off of an SSD on Series X or whatever, it's nowhere near as fast. It's like the difference between 2-second load and like 10.
Yeah,
which is
crazy.
Still a 10-second load for a game that looks that good is still very good, but it's cool to see a third-party developer take full advantage of the specific SSD on the PS5.
Definitely. And apart from that, I haven't played Resident Evil 7 since it came out, so I should go back and replay it at some point. I'm sure I will, so I can kind of get a better feel for it. But I really loved it, and this game is great. I think, first of all, the ambience of the game can't be understated. The Eastern European setting is pretty neat, too, and the way that they kind of combine the Eastern European trappings of horror, which is typically like vampires and werewolves and all that shit, Castlevania type stuff, and they bring it into Resident Evil. I'm not like a huge Resident Evil fan, but I've played every Resident Evil core game except for 6. And most of the spin-offs, like Zero and Code Veronica and everything. And I don't remember a game ever taking place in Eastern Europe. I could be wrong about that. Like you have Spain for Resident Evil 4, you have Africa for Resident Evil 5, et cetera, and so on. Obviously the US for the other games. So just the setting itself is very different, very, very rustic. And I really like that a lot. And I just couldn't help but remark over and over again, I'm like, God damn it. Like seeing this castle in the background, I'm like, Castlevania. Like I just kept screaming it over and over again as I was playing. I'm like, why? Look at how good it looks. Look how good this looks. This cat and Bloodborne, of course, and did the same thing for me. But there are cool moments that I wanted to bring up too, just a couple of them. There's a moment early in the game where, and I'm only about halfway through myself, I think. I don't know where I really am. I'm played for like 5 or 6 hours. I'm pretty slow too, so. But you're walking through like in the village, you're walking through like this high grass, and there's like scarecrows, and you can hear the enemies around you, but you can't see them because of the grass, and the grass is moving and you're walking through and the sound is, it was so cool. This is a really cool moment. And there was another moment I wanted to write down where you're in the village and there are enemy, and you could see the enemy shadows along this wall. I was noting to Micah, I'm like, what's cool about this design is not that they thought to do that, but that the lighting source has to be consistent with the where the building is and all of that. In other words, the designers needed to have seen this setup in order to have this one cool moment payoff that some people might not even see. So it's really fun to explore from that point of view. I love enemy lieutenants. My role-playing game that I'm writing is structured around enemy lieutenants. Just like, I love that motif. I think it's cool where you have like a bunch of different enemies that are different kinds. And Resident Evil Village has that. I didn't actually know that going in because I wasn't really paying too close attention. And I do think, though, that the Lady D kind of chasing you around is a little bit tropey. I mean, it does feel like Nemesis. It feels like Mr. X in a way. It's a little bit contrived. But I do love watching her like duck into the door wells and stuff. It's very creepy. I mean, she's a very creepy character.
Yeah.
And the other two things I wanted to bring up, and then I'll move on, is love the shopkeeper, Duke. Awesome character design. Love it. Never saw anything of him before I played it, so it was a surprise to me. It's super cool. And the other thing I like is there's a heavy emphasis on Eastern European and Orthodox Christian imagery, which is also not something that is seen typically in Resident Evil. So very Russian in some way. Idols and relics and paintings. I really like this game. Highly recommended. Highly recommended so far.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah, what are you waiting for? You're just busy?
No, this is what I was talking about earlier. I'm trying to discipline myself. I'm working on Returnal, and I want to finish it.
So talk to us about Returnal. What are your thoughts? I mean, I'm very eager to hear what your thoughts, because you weren't here last week about this game, and I think you like it a lot more than us. So
I do. I like it a lot. I think the gameplay of it. I was particularly stunned by how well it controls. Like, I think it's like just the way that your inputs are displayed to you or communicated to you is so snappy that I wish more PlayStation exclusives controlled as tightly as this. I understand why they don't. Obviously, there's like different reasons for different control schemes. Obviously, Resident Evil is going to things like Resident Evil even are just they're not going to play like Titanfall for obvious reasons.
Right.
But I just love the way it controls. I really dig the roguelike nature of it. I didn't think I would. I guess I just kind of came into this game with like pretty low expectations, just because like I'm not super familiar with Housemarque. I'm not super into roguelites. The marketing was kind of weird. They didn't really give me a really good idea of what the game was. And playing it, I was pretty pleasantly surprised. I have some issues with it. I think the difficulty spikes are kind of absurd in some places. Like, some runs will be like I'll breeze through everything, and then some runs I'll just get trounced in the first biome. I think I'm only at like the end of the third biome, and I keep getting just massacred in this third biome. It's like really hard. I think it's harder than I think most people will be prepared for. Like, it's not an easy game, like, at all. Especially like the further in you get, it just gets worse and worse.
Right.
And like in a good way, I guess. But I had some crashing issues, which was deeply frustrating considering how long the runs are. I never had this feeling when I finished a run, and this is like probably the worst thing about it, is when I'm 3 hours into a run and I die, the game is so taxing and exhausting in a way that like Doom Eternal is in a lot of ways. It's like very fast, very frenetic, very push-oriented combat that when I die, I'm never feeling like, oh, one more run. Which is kind of like what roguelikes are kind of built on, like Hades and Dead Cells and all these other really like pinnacles of the genre are really famous and well loved because like it never feels like you've lost a lot when you die. Like losing feels like progress in those games. But in this game, I noticed that losing feels like the opposite. It feels like, oh shit, I just wasted so much time.
I agree.
And part of that really sucks It's really frustrating. But at the same time, it does have this kind of Souls quality to it where when you beat a boss, it's extra satisfying because it's so ridiculously hard. I don't think this game is nearly as approachable as people are probably expecting it to be. I think it suffers from a bit of a problem of this is just on PS5 and there's not a lot on PS5, so a lot of people are going to jump into it and they're just going to be like, why is this hurting my feelings?
There's a lot of staunch defenders of it because of that, I think, where people are just kind of looking for something, you know. It's it's less accessible than I thought it was.
I like it despite the myriad of problems that I have with it. Specifically, the instability of it is not acceptable.
No, I agree.
Losing 3 hours of progress upon a death is frustrating enough, but losing 3 hours of progress because the game decided to just stop working is a different thing entirely, and I don't think that's okay. But this kind of goes back to the conversation we were having about $70 games and their value. And I gotta say, like, if I paid $70 for this, I'd be a little upset. I not because the game's not well designed and not because the game's not fun and not because the game's not challenging, but if I'm paying $70 for a game, I think the bare minimum that I should expect is that it works and that it doesn't crash.
That's fair.
And that there's a fucking save state somewhere.
It's like we noted last week. Housemarque has these weird, peculiar issues with their games. It with the PlayStation Network specifically, it goes back to PS3. I don't know why that is.
Yeah.
It's especially because they're coming from the second party, so you think they would be able to to overcome those issues. But Dustin, are you still messing with it here? What are you thinking about Returnal?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot more time in since last week. I just on stream last night beat the second boss, so I was checking out the third biome. You know, Colin, the reaction to our conversation last week I found really weird. I kind of wanted to go back and listen to it.
Yeah, me too.
To see what we said, because a couple of people were like, wow, Colin really trashed Returnal. I'm like, that's not what happened at all.
It's definitely not.
Like, to me, the impression I had was like last week I was like, I like it. It has some problems. And you were like, it's good, but I don't know if it's for me. Was the takeaway, but I don't know. That's
what I mean. That's what I feel like I said. Yeah,
right. I need to. Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But
how could you trash it like that?
I know.
Yeah.
God damn it! How can it not be for you?
Right. No, I think Chris really hit everything on the head as far as like the instability, which surprisingly I have not had it crash for me one time yet.
That's astonishing, actually. Yeah.
Lucky.
As a small update to our associate editor Ben. He still can't play the game. It crashes every single time. Like,
yeah, that's unbelievable.
That's not acceptable. That's insane. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but like,
no, good.
The inconsistency of this game is something that I just can't fathom. How is it that like some people are running it flawlessly? I have like periodic crashes. I think it crashed on me. I think maybe like three times in my overall time, which is, you know, in comparison, not a lot. Like, I can still kind of like look past it and enjoy it. But dude, like, flawless runs, occasional crashes to Ben can't get past like the first like cutscene where you find a dead astronaut. That's insane.
So just to be clear, because I know that when I mentioned this last week, a lot of the audience either jumped in to tell me to tell Ben things or went to Ben directly. Ben has tried everything. He's tried deleting the game. He's tried reinstalling it. He has hard-wiped his PS5 multiple times.
Ooh. That takes like a day, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You do that?
Did
he wrap his PS5 in a wet towel?
Oh, there you go. A wet towel. Wow, next level. He even went so far as to, I don't know, maybe this isn't fully kosher to say, but someone said, hey, I know you already bought the game, but I have it digitally. Would you like to log onto my account and see if there's somehow something wrong with your disc, or maybe it will work the download version? Right. So I was like, okay, well, there's nothing ethically wrong with this. He downloaded, he logged in, and he started from that person's save, and he got like 8 minutes in, crash. So at this point, he doesn't know if it's something wrong with his.
It's got to be the console.
Well, what's funny is he talked to Sony, the Sony help chat, and they were like, yeah, we don't know really what's going on. We suggest you take your PS5 back to the retailer you bought it from and try to get a return or exchange.
Yeah, good luck.
Then said, "Oh, well, I actually bought it directly from PlayStation." And the chat person said, "Oh, great. Have a nice day." Turned off the chat.
Wow, I believe it. I mean, that's Sony.
Yeah.
They don't really
Wow.
seem to care at all. It is the technical issues behind the game, regardless of what people are experiencing on a personal basis, is totally weird. It's very unacceptable for a game. And to Chris's point, before I talk more about the game, because I haven't gotten much further, I don't think it's a $70 game. And I think a lot of people are asking about this, and I'm like, no, I don't think so. Maybe Ratchet, but this seems more like a $40 or $50 game to me. So I can understand people's a little bit extra angst about this, but I gotta say, I mean, it's what I said last week. I sat with it for probably a few more hours. I finally got to the first boss a few times, and I'm like, I don't know what it is. Like, I can't play this game. Like, I don't like this very much. It's not that it's bad. It's actually, to Chris's point, it feels great. To me, I'm like, I wish that this was a third-person narrative-driven shooter that felt like this, that I can play, as opposed to having all of these arcane rules and all this. It just doesn't feel like a Housemarque game to me. And I think that for some people that will not matter because they don't care about Housemarque or they're not familiar or it doesn't matter. But for me, it matters a lot. Like, I want a simple arcade game from them that requires great skill to get good at. But like, anyone can beat Resogun. Beating Resogun is not what the point is. Getting a high score and not dying while playing Resogun is the point. And I feel like the further you get from that, the more questionable Housemarque's kind of talent, I think, becomes. But to me, I'm clearly in the minority. I respect that. I think what's going to be for me is, because I've moved on. I'm with Resident Evil now. I want to play Biomutant. Returnal's going to go away now. So, but I believe it'll be like Bloodborne for me. When Bloodborne came out in 2015, I played it a little bit. I didn't like it, put it away, and then it wasn't until 2 years later that I actually played it, and I'm like, I get it, and I like it a lot. So sometimes you just have to hit things at the right time. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to ask this from Ben Williams, because I did want to bring another topic up in regard to Returnal. He says, "Hello, my baby boys. What are some ways you think Returnal really excels as a game? For me, I think they have integrated the concepts of risk versus reward really well into all facets of the game. Parasites give you buffs and debuffs. You can skip certain biomes as the game progresses to move more quickly at the risk of being underpowered. Many of the collectibles have the chance to give you suit malfunctions, and how quickly you press into a room determines the rate of enemy spawns." I didn't know that. "Personally, it makes the whole experience heart-pounding every time. Would love to hear your thoughts." I mean, it's all the back-end tech that they have working in the game and the rule set that, to me, kind of works against it personally, but it's interesting to hear Ben think it's so positive. Chris, I'm curious what you think Returnal does best, because for me, as I said last week, it is a masterclass of how to use the DualSense, and I think that is what I'm walking away from about, like, wow, this is awesome. This is so cool the way you use the controller. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think I wasn't paying that much attention to it. In fairness, it wasn't like Astro in my mind, where like Astrobot kind of put the DualSense at the forefront, whereas like I feel like Returnal does a really good job of like utilizing it without necessarily shouting from the rooftops like, "Hey, look at me, I'm a controller and I'm doing cool things." It's very subtle in the way that it uses like vibration and sound to the point where I almost didn't even realize that the DualSense was doing anything until I like became cognizant of it. It's like, oh, this is cool. The weapons feel pretty good. I don't know how I feel about the left trigger doing that half thing, because I have a tendency to pull as far as possible, like every time. Like even it's the reason my thumbs were bleeding when I was playing Crash Team Racing, because even though I know I could just press the X button, for some reason I feel the need to put all my weight on my thumb, and
you go faster that way.
Yeah, exactly. I had a bit of trouble getting used to like that, but aside from that, I think everything else about it is like really good. The way it uses the DualSense in particular, I think what Returnal excels at is the moment to moment like gameplay and like the loop of like dodging in between these like slow moving projectiles feels so good. Like it's like a really amazing. It reminds me of Doom Eternal like a lot. Like sincerely, like just the way that you bob and weave and dash, and the combat kind of like pushes you to get up close and personal. Even like with the long distance like weapons that you have, you gotta go to your kills to collect your obleets or whatever the hell, the oblites. I don't know what the hell they're calling them.
Yeah.
Some bullshit.
I do dig that they make you go in and get them because they disappear so quickly. It's cool.
Yeah, but it's a good. I like the push forward combat style of it, and the arena nature of it. I think it just feels really good to play. There are just some points where like the RNG is really rough, and you reach a boss and you're like, well, I've got a thing that teleports me somewhere else, and that's really, I don't know. That kind of works against it in some ways, but I don't think there's. It's weird. It just sucks because the technical issues and just like the weird pacing issues of like the long runs kind of get in the way of how good the game feels to play. Because I think without a doubt it's the best feeling game like to play on PS5 so far.
I agree. It does feel good. The shooting's very good, and I'm more intrigued. I'm so intrigued by the lore and like what's going on this planet that I want to read more about that or see more about that. But I can't. Dustin, what do you think the game most excels at?
Most excels at. I'm sorry. Chris is on fire today.
Yeah.
That's the thing to me is that, especially no details, but the second boss really starts to challenge you into like, okay, when you dash, you're invincible for that moment. So you really got to start using that because there's many moments in that second boss where you got to dash, you got to jump or something because there's projectiles everywhere. And they really just nailed that movement and flow, for sure. Like, and it's not surprising. I think from Housemarque, I feel like all of their games just feel good to play. Like that's what has kept us from kept us to going back to Resogun. That's a game I always keep installed all the time because sometimes I just want to play a few rounds and because it feels good to play.
It's awesome. I love Resogun. One of the greats on PS4. I'll agree and just say that, in addition to the controls and the lore, there is something to the game. I totally understand it. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with it. I just think that it's not for me.
Yeah.
And you're right, Chris. Like, roguelikes do have you come back for reasons, and I feel like this game doesn't. I brought up last week, I just can't stop thinking about Rogue Legacy. I loved that game, but the game did a really nice job of killing you and then making it feel like you want to go back because you're a little stronger. You're like, I'm just struggling with Returnal. I know that I have to put it away for a little while now and just move on with my life. So we will do that. But Chris, it says here you're playing Destiny 2 Season of the Splicer as well. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so obviously there's a new Destiny season. I'm the only person on here that plays Destiny, so I feel obligated to talk about it because it is new and kind of cool.
And it's popular.
They're doing some cool stuff lore-wise. They still haven't really addressed the PvP scenario, which is kind of exploding on Twitter right now. Like, there's a huge amount of people talking about just how this new subclass that they added with Beyond Light in Fall is just really destroying PvP to the point where it's like people are like speculating. People are speculating whether or not they're intentionally making PvP worse, so people will like be driven to Bungie's next proper competitive multiplayer shooter that they're supposedly working on. But it's really upsetting because so much of the season that they're doing right now is really fleshing out the narrative, and it feels like finally there's a story in Destiny that's really cool and really like rewarding and really immersive and really coherent and just really engaging, but it's just marred by this like horrendous neglect of an entire part of the player base and just a couple other weird things like cosmetic changes being something you have to grind for, and it's like, it's tied to microtransactions, and it's like it feels like really disheartening because it's so stingy that it's like beyond the realm of just a casual like, oh, we miscalculated. It feels deliberately like they're just trying to scam you, it sucks. It's a really mixed bag of emotions that I'm feeling, but Destiny still plays really well, which is the reason I play it. So as long as it doesn't play worse, I'm all right.
Right on.
But that's all I've had time to play. I want to finish Returnal, or at least get far enough that I can feel like okay You know, I want to get to at least the end of the 5th biome. If I can't get past 6, then fine. And then I'm going to work my way into Resi 8 because I'm really stoked on it. Everything that I'm hearing about it says seems like it's a game that I'll probably like. I didn't get too far into 7. It was too Amnesia or Outlast for me. But this seems like Resident Evil 4 again.
Yeah, to Dustin's point, it's much more combat oriented. I even remember that, and I actually restarted a couple times, not totally, but just went back to my last save because I'm using too much ammo. And then I go back and I'm like, oh, there's just a shit ton of ammo in the game. It doesn't really even matter, which is very un-Resident Evil. Although they've gotten, it kind of started with Resident Evil 5 in a way. So I want to, let's see here. We got through everything. Oh, yeah. I wanted to bring up, oh, yeah, Dustin, actually, you're playing Near Replicant. I'm sorry. I was going to bring up my game, but I wanted to bring up your games. So, yeah, talk to me about that.
Real quick, because we've talked about it the last few weeks, but I have finished it now, so the full breakdown of the game will be whenever Maddie and I do the spoiler cast. But people have been asking me, like, Dustin, should I buy and play Near Replicant? And the phrase I've come up with is that it is an experience worth suffering for because I think it's a great game. In fact, I think it's probably my favorite, not the best, but my favorite game so far this year.
Interesting.
But this game has some major problems, like big, to me, problems with how it does, mainly in how it structures itself with the story, because if you know about Nier Automata, it's very famously like you do multiple playthroughs that are very different each time to get the full experience. This game, because it's the one before it, started that structure, but didn't do it as well in that you're going to be replaying content multiple times, and it's a fucking drag at points. And then on top of that, when you get to some of the later endings like D&E, they're like, oh yeah, by the way, if you want to, this next playthrough is going to be pretty much exactly the same, and if you want to see the next ending, you have to collect all the weapons. It's like, it felt like I was being punished for wanting to see the entire story. But, like I said, what's there? Man, this is like a game that like I'm laying in bed at night like thinking about, like, wow, this is from a philosophical level, very, and I'm not trying to, it's an anime game, guys. I'm not trying to like hype it up to be like, you know, this philosophical monument in art, but it gets you thinking. And so, you know, if you're willing to deal with that type of stuff, I definitely recommend it. Maybe check out Automata first, though. If you like Automata, it is definitely worth playing through this game.
Cool. Yeah, so we'll get the Maddie's playing that too, and so we'll get the spoiler cast spooled up soon. It's also worth noting we'll do a spoiler cast. I'd like to try to get one for Returnal. I just don't know if we're going to be able to do it. So we'll see. We'll definitely do one for Resident Evil 8. So all those will pop out in the next month or month and a half, I assume, on Sacred Symbols Plus. I just wanted to throw in real quick that I platinumed Outriders, so I'm done with Outriders now. Awesome game. Game of the year for me so far, no doubt. I love it. Love it. Awesome game. Congratulations to People Can Fly. But I've said enough about that game. Jacko wrote into us, though, before we go into the news. He says, hello, CDC. With Returnal now out in the wild, Ratchet & Clank just around the corner, and Kenna still on track for August, when do you think is the right time for Sony to talk about its late 2021 through 2022 plans? I personally can't see Horizon Forbidden West making the end of the year, as I feel we'd have heard more of it by now, but could it be the first big February or March release, followed by God of War and a similar Ratchet & Clank slot for 2022? First time writing in, so just want to say thank you for the amazing content over the years. It has been and still is a joy to listen to and watch the shows every week. Thank you, Jacko. Appreciate that. So the Horizon thing is interesting because we're going to have a little bit of news about that next in the first news item. But how do you feel like, Chris, what do you think Sony's kind of stance is from here? When are they going to start talking? Kenna is a third-party game, but it is a timed exclusive as far as I can tell. It looks great. They're already working apparently on another game for PlayStation. So how do you think this is all going to fold out? When do you think Sony's going to start talking?
I think they're probably going to start talking soon. I would imagine E3 time is probably when they're going to start talking about what's happening for fall. I think Horizon's going to hit fall. I think we've seen the game running, which is more than we can say for God of War. You know, like we've seen actually when you compare the two, we've seen a significant amount of Forbidden West. We've actually seen the game running. We've seen like biomes. We've seen characters, and we have a pretty good like. I think the game's gonna hit for fall. I would be surprised if it didn't.
I do too. I'm confident in that now, and we'll talk about why in a moment. Yeah.
Well, I just purely for me, I just like I can't imagine. I just can't imagine Horizon coming out in like February, and then that would mean like what God of War would be technically pushed to probably fall of 2022, and I don't see that happening. It would be fascinating, but like they need something for fall, and chances are Horizon is going to be that thing. And I would imagine next month or the month after, in the next 2 months, you're probably going to see them talking about like more concretely about like what they have planned, because that's just when people talk. Summer is just when people talk.
Yeah.
I don't know who decided that. I wasn't on the committee for that.
Right.
But that's just how it goes.
I don't know exactly why that is either, but my assumption is that back in the day, games didn't come out in the summer, and so it was.
Yeah.
Remember like how few games would come out? There would be like weeks sometimes with no retail releases. And if there were no retail releases, there was nothing because there were no digital games at that time. So I always remember that like there would be like one game, because I used to keep the calendar at IGN sometimes, like the game calendar, and be like, God, there's nothing coming out for 2 months. We don't have that problem anymore, which is nice. What do you think, Dustin? What do you think Sony is going to talk? I agree with Chris that even though they won't participate in E3, it seems likely that they'll have some sort of state of play or something. They can just roll that out whenever they want. So.
Right, that's what they've traditionally done since they've left E3 behind, and it seems like everyone's still, even the other players that aren't involved with E3, like EA, they announced their thing for July. EA Play.
Yeah, I skipped over that actually. EA Play this year is July 22nd.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's same thing. Like either June or July, most likely. I think we're gonna get a pretty big blowout. A lot of things on the table here. The stakes are high. And that's what makes it exciting.
Or in the words of De La Soul, the stakes is high. And yeah, I feel like let's talk about the next. Let's get into the news, because I think we'll be able to at least solve one of these issues right now. I think. So let's go into the news. Number one, PlayStation clearly likes Wired and has thus given it another PlayStation 5 story that has some interesting news emanating from within it. For starters, Sony sees PS5 scarcity letting up, but not anytime immediately. According to the brand's CEO, Jim Ryan, Sony sees, quote, production ramping up over the summer and certainly into the second half of the year, and we would hope to see some sort of return to normality in terms of the balance between supply and demand during that period, end quote. In other words, don't expect to get a PlayStation 5 on demand until 2022, news that falls in line with previous rumors and reporting. The story also seems to confirm, at least in its own wording, that Guerrilla Games' sequel to Horizon, entitled Forbidden West, will arrive on both PS4 and PS5 this fall. This is notable because the game has been conjectured to perhaps have been delayed. Indeed, Wired had access to Guerrilla's studio director and Horizon and Killzone's producer, Angie Smets, seemingly confirming the good news. So I just want to stop there. In the Wired article, they talk to Angie Smets about Horizon directly, and they talk about the game coming this fall. So that's an iteration of that. Let's see here. But maybe the biggest news for games comes from Herman Holst, who heads Sony's first-party family. He used to lead Guerrilla. According to him, Sony's first-party family has 25 games in development, with nearly half of those being new franchises. He noted that, quote, there's an incredible amount of variety originating from different regions, big, small, different genres, end quote. According to Sony's internal stats, PS5 users are playing their consoles 81% more than PS4 users during the same opening 5-month period for that console, beginning in 2013 and spanning into 2014. And we now know precisely how many more PS5s were sold than PS4s during those first months. PS5 is outselling PS4 by about 11%. And that is completely supply constrained. So pretty incredible. Now, the big news out of this is obviously the 25 games in development. And Fishtig wrote into us about this on Patreon. He says, hey, chaps, I'm sure you've seen the news, but Herman Holst has said there are 25 PS5 games in development and at least half are new properties. Does this mean some first-party teams are making more than one game like Insomniac, or are they including indie games and console exclusives like Final Fantasy 16? Much love. So I actually reread the Wired article because I am not sure what the answer to this is. Final Fantasy 16 is a third-party exclusive. They're certainly not counting that. It's unclear if they're counting second-party games. That is unclear. Because when you talk to Sony, what they'll say to you is that there are such a thing as second-party teams, but there are no such thing as second-party games. That's usually what they'll say, because they say they treat their second-party games like first-party games. So my assumption, and by the way, they use the term PlayStation Studios, and Herman Holst is not in charge of external products. He's in charge of PlayStation Studios. So I don't know. In reading the news, I'm like, I'm not sure. My gut instinct says that this is 25 games from first party, ranging from Pixel Opus all the way to Naughty Dog. And when you think about it, it's not really that unbelievable. Naughty Dog might have up to 3 or 4 games in development right now. That brings the list down to 21. So, Chris, let's start with you. I mean, what do you think about this 25 games in development? What do you think it tells you? Are you excited? Do you think it's meaningful? Talk to me about that.
I think it's good. There's always a concern about like stretching a developer a bit thin, which like always comes up when these conversations happen. But I think overall it's like a pretty good thing that they've got a pretty solid lineup, and we know that Naughty Dog is working on multiple things. We know for sure Insomniac can handle multiple projects.
Probably 4, maybe even 5 at the same time over there. So yeah.
So, like, the big first party, and we still don't know what's going on with Guerrilla as far as, like, if they're working on Horizon and, this SOCOM. Like, it's very clear that these studios are working on more than one thing, and obviously, like, as you get lower and lower down the list, you get to some studios that are, maybe producing, single projects, but at that point, it doesn't matter because you've got so much in development from your bigger teams. I think this is good. I think it shows a lot of health for PlayStation, and I think if this were any other umbrella, it would be concerning. But I think Insomniac themselves, like single-handedly, has done a lot to kind of assuage a lot of concerns as far as that goes. Just because Spider-Man was so good and Ratchet looks so good, and they're releasing so close to each other in comparison to so many other, first party. It's insane. Like, Insomniac is a powerhouse, and they really lucked out.
Yeah, $229 million, very well spent.
Yeah,
I would say.
But yeah, it's not surprising to me. It's.
But do you think? So you think the 25 games are first party only?
I think so. I think.
I'm of the mind as well.
There's no way. Like you said, like they're not gonna. I guess it's a possibility that there could be like a Predator Hunting Grounds in there. Or like a handful of those, but I would imagine like maybe like out of the 25 games, maybe generous, maybe like 7 of them are probably like those, or like 7 to 10 of games are like Predator Hunting Grounds or some other thing that we don't know about yet. But the majority of things that we're going to be getting, I would assume, are proper first party.
Yeah, it's hard for me to know if they're playing games or not. Pardon the pun, but if they're playing games with the terminology, because Housemarque is a PlayStation Studios game, or
right.
I'm sorry, Returnal is a PlayStation Studios game. So I don't know. I don't know exactly how to line it up, but it does go into what they were saying in their recent financials, where they said that they're going to put about $200 or $250 million into the existing first party teams, not making new ones. That's enough to pay for 3 or 4 big AAA games. So, Dustin, what is your feeling on that particular aspect of it? 25 games, PlayStation Studios. It's worth noting, by the way, that I want to sit down, maybe after the McCaffrey episode, maybe I'll do it, maybe we'll all sit down to do a Sacred Symbols Plus, where we can really try to figure out, if we can say, like, there are 25, here are the teams. Yeah. What do we think is going on? It would actually be a very fun exercise. I think we could do it. So what are your thoughts, Dustin?
Something important to remember is that Sony, PlayStation, whatever, they're launching another sub-platform, is what we'll call it, next year with the sequel, whatever, the next iteration of PlayStation VR.
Right.
So you got to imagine that they want to have 4 to 5 first-party games. Now, some people may say, well, they only had 2 first-party games for, was it 2 for the launch of PS5?
Yeah, Until Dawn, Rush of Blood, and
I was thinking for the whole console for PS5.
Oh, I'm sorry, PS5. I thought you were talking about PSVR. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was,
Well, they had 2. 1 technically was an exclusive.
Right. I feel like they're going to want to have...
Destruction All-Stars didn't happen, actually.
And right. Astro...
Right, a lot of caveats.
It gets muddy, actually, now that you think about it, because, like, what do you... That is interesting. The PSVR thing is kind of... Because you know for sure Insomniac's working on something for that, right? They're the studio they have with the most VR experience. There's no way a small team at Insomniac isn't hammering away at something for PSVR 2.
Right.
Yeah, I hadn't considered the VR angle. That would explain explain the high number.
It could, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I feel like, they had two first party games or whatever. We talked about the confusing nature at PS5's launch, kind of a little light, but I feel like for PSVR, like you're already talking about a niche product or a niche product, as Colin says. With PSVR, you really want to hook people in. They're probably going to charge $500 for the headset itself, so they really got to bring that software. It's really gonna hook people. So I think that we can, like I said, maybe 5 of those, ranging in size as well. And that's what we saw with PSVR. We saw, like Colin said, Rush of Blood, much smaller game, and then we had larger titles as well.
Yeah, Resident Evil 7 was an early PSVR game.
Right, which, dude, I was wondering, I'm like, man, could you do a Resident Evil 5 VR version? Or not 5, what am I saying?
8.
Resident Evil 8.
Yeah, I was going to say,
wow.
Please no Resident Evil 5.
No, Resident Evil 5 VR, let's go, the worst one.
You get to punch a boulder in VR.
Yeah, but
Fun.
dude, I was thinking, like, man, Resident Evil 8 in VR would just be amazing, especially...
Yeah, definitely. We're going to talk more about PSVR in a little while.
Yeah, right, I saw that in the notes, but... Yeah. And the other thing, too, that I think is exciting... I'm trying to remember if it's a quote in the actual Wired article that he was saying they were varying in size. Which is
he
important.
says that they're different in size, geography, and all of that, like coming from all different parts of the world. Which makes sense.
Like,
their studios are all over the world.
Yeah, I feel like that's a direct response to the Schreier article in Bloomberg that was like very like, hey, we're only blockbusters now, no smaller games. That's kind of that's not what Jason said, but that's very much the impression that the article gave off, at least to me, to many others. And so I think that statement there is purely like a cool it. Like, we've got smaller stuff too as well, and this, there's a wide range that's out there with these 25 titles. So did you get that impression though, that was kind of a reply to that?
Yeah, I think the whole article is a reply to, I think clearly Sony PR went to Wired and was like, we have things to say,
please.
And what I was writing down here in my notes was that one of the interesting things is that they say nearly half of the games are new IP. So if you take 25 games, 13 of them are old IP and 12 of them would be new. I mean, that's kind of how I interpret it, or something like that, maybe 14, 11, whatever. But it's exciting when you say, all right, so 13 of these are existing IP, and then I just start writing them down. So it's like, okay, Uncharted, we know that. The Last of Us is coming with factions.
Oh, but
God of War.
Now, are they gonna do a thing where factions is its own thing?
I don't know.
Like, will factions be its own separate kind of thing, as opposed to just like an add-on to The Last of Us Part 2? I could see that happening.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, the point I'm making is what's tantalizing is that if you just put Uncharted, we know Uncharted is in development. We know The Last of Us in some tangential ways in development, God of War and Horizon. So that leaves 8 or 9 old IP slots. It's actually pretty exciting. It's like, okay, SOCOM, Infamous,
Tomba 3, lock it in.
Sony doesn't own Tomba. But Resistance? Siphon Filter, probably not.
No.
Little Big Planet. Well, obviously Gran Turismo is one of them. I mean, it's exciting when you think about it. It's like, I don't know. Until Dawn could be one, although that's a second-party game. I don't know. It's really cool. Killzone. It's cool to think about. And I mean, when you really dig deep, it's like, well, what's clearly happening is that they're going to go way back and maybe revive some really old shit. It's like, well, Colony Wars? Are you going to revive Colony Wars? Are you going to revive Ghost Hunter? Are you going to revive The Getaway? I still think The Getaway would be an obvious one. I felt that way for so long. It's like, why don't you make a PlayStation exclusive open world Grand Theft Auto type game? It'd be huge. But regardless. All right, the next thing I wanted to touch on here comes from Eric Dondarian, who wrote into us and said, hey, CDC. I saw the news that PlayStation expects PS5 shortages to last into next year at this point. With that in mind, I wonder if you expect this to have any effect on the release date of God of War Ragnarok. Assuming it is a PS5 exclusive, it's true that we don't know that yet. Do you think Sony is willing to launch one of their most popular franchises onto a console that people still aren't able to get their hands on? I don't think it should matter, but it seems like this would definitely cause some outrage amongst some of the hardcore fans. I understand the question, Eric. I think you're being a devil's advocate, which is cool. So it doesn't seem like something you believe yourself. But Chris, I'm really of the mind that this is a nonsense argument. And it's an argument that's never been made before in any other generation, where people are like, well, I can't find the console, or I don't have the console, so I can't find the Wii, so Super Mario Galaxy should be a GameCube game. I mean, that's always the example I use, right? It's the same thing that people are saying now. We just saw the stats. PlayStation 5 is outselling PS4. There are more PS5s in the wild right now than there were PS4s in the wild right now.
Yeah.
So if anything, you would want to make the argument in the inverse, saying like, well, Infamous Second Son came to PS4 when there were fewer PS4s than there are PS5s right now, and no one had a problem with that. So I think my hope is, and my belief is that God of War is a PS5 game. I mean, that is my belief on the record, that it is not a cross-generational game. I think that would be fucking stupid as hell for a showcase game like that to do that. But I do think that it will come out next year, and I think maybe in the first quarter. I mean, how do you feel about this persistent argument, Chris, that the shortages should affect when and how the games come out? Because I just think people are overestimating the nature of the shortage.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like I'm always pulled in every direction with this kind of thing, because at the same time, I feel like you should have new things for your new machine. You know, there needs to be a reason to get the machine that is just beyond, you know, here's a boost in frame rate, here's a boost in resolution. Those things are amazing and cannot be, you know, you can't sneeze at that. That's stuff that's like really amazing. But you need the hardware to really or the software to really showcase that and really make a case. And I understand that, but I also understand with games being, you know, more and more expensive, dev cycles becoming longer and longer, the necessity to make that money back quickly, I kind of get. I kind of get the want to be like, hey, the new God of War came out, and guess what? Because it's out on PS4 also, it's sold like 10 million units in its first like 2 weeks. That is valuable. And I don't know, like I feel like I can see both sides. My preference would be that, yeah, this should be a PS5 game. And it should be a PS5 exclusive. Whether or not people can get their hands on the console is an entirely separate matter because, as we said, there's more PS5s out in the wild now than there were PS4s, and PS4 had exclusives. PS4 had Infamous, you know, pretty soon after.
Killzone and Knack. I'm not saying these are good games, but I'm just saying they had games, you know, like that were just for the console.
I do think also there's just kind of like a weird there's just been a massive evolution into just how the overall player base thinks about their software in comparison to PS3 to PS4. This kind of like generational reset was becoming strange when the PS4 launched, because it's like, oh wait, why can't I? They're both Blu-ray discs. Like why doesn't this work on that? Like I don't understand. So, and now I think it's even more exacerbated because the differences between, you know, The Last of Us Part 2 looks incredible. Still. It's a visually, like, stunning game.
Definitely.
And it doesn't really look all that dissimilar. Like, obviously, like, Demon's Souls and you know, Returnal, well, not Returnal less so. I actually don't think Returnal looks all that good. But in comparison to Demon's Souls anyway.
Yeah, I agree,
Demon's
actually.
Souls,
yeah.
Demon's Souls looks like stunning, but it's mostly due to resolution and that bump in resolution. Like Last of Us Part 2 and Demon's Souls, as far as like visual, like as far as on the visual front, don't look different enough in technology to your average person to feel justified in being locked off.
Right.
You know?
Yeah,
if
late
you see
gen
God of
PS4
War,
and early gen PS5 are kind of the same in some way.
yeah, and it's kind of hard to really justify for a lot of people just the thought of like that game could run on PS4. Like it probably could. Like Ratchet obviously can't because it's playing with, you know, instantaneous loading as a part of its very gameplay mechanic. But a game like Resident Evil, I'm sure you guys playing through it, I'm sure you're noticing the fast load times, but I'm sure you're also noticing that as a video game, surely it could run on PS4. Like surely.
Yeah, I would assume
Like,
so. Yeah, if you just bump the resolution, bump the frame rate. all of that.
Yeah, I just think we're at a weird place where the lines between generations are just kind of a little bit more muddy than they were before. They're a little bit more ambiguous, and that's just sort of leading to people kind of maybe just expecting that things are more universally available. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I get it.
Yeah,
When you're seeing marketing and it's all just like, hey, it's 60 frames and that's it. And it's like, all right, well.
I wonder, Dustin, what your take is on this. I mean, I don't know. I'm really bummed by what I don't know how to put this. Like, it's almost a perceived selfishness of being like, well, millions of you have it, more of you have it than we used to on the PS4 side, but we can't play it, we can't find it, we don't want you to have those games. It's not to say there is a little bit of power in that, though, like a little bit of marketing power. To Chris's point, if enough people complain, then Sony might be more likely to make a concession. And I just think it's a bummer because even though we've heard Capcom recently and others say like, well, we kind of ported our games backwards and all of that, it's like, well, there's still concessions made. God of War as a PS5 game only made for the PS5 is going to be better than a God of War that is cross-generation. And I just want to remind people that the whole cross-generational aspect of PlayStation releases is new. This doesn't happen with the first party. It happened a little bit with the PS4 with the second party when you saw games like Little Big Planet 3. But I just feel like this is, I don't know what people's problem is. Like when I couldn't find a Wii for a year, I wasn't like harping on why people shouldn't play Wii games and I should get them on GameCube.
Yeah. Right. I'm somewhere between empathy and entitlement in a way, because I do feel bad for people if they want this product. If you work a 9 to 5, you can't be on Twitter all day waiting to see when the drops happen.
Sure.
I get that. And I have a lot of empathy for that. But like you said, Sony's doing everything they can to get as many of these units out there. I mean, we just talked about last week how they're redesigning the console to get better yields on the CPU. Like, they're doing everything I'm sure they're just as frustrated that they can't sell how many more million of these if they were just available.
Yeah, we don't know. Like, what's funny is that at 11% outpace with a supply constrained console, we don't actually know how many they would have sold. It's actually unknowable if it was saturated. It's interesting.
Yeah. And they're more expensive to make now because the demand for the prices is so much higher than they otherwise would be.
Definitely.
Or the demand for the chips. It's a really shitty situation for pretty much everybody.
And you can see too that demand is, I mean, obviously there's still a lot of it, but you can look at the eBay sell prices and they are going down. I think, like, wasn't at one point it was like well over 1,000.
Yeah,
right?
I would assume it's probably like in the 700 to 800 range now, right? Something
Yeah,
like that.
That's exactly it. I just looked at it the other day. So it is like slowing down. People are starting. There's still, I mean, a heavy premium to be paid, but it's not like 3 times the price of the console or anything like that. So in one sense, I'm just like, you gotta be understanding of the situation. Sony can't like bend over backwards for you in this situation. And like we've said, they've already done a really good job getting out 10% more than they did last time.
Yeah,
in the current situation. So in one sense, I'm like, cool it. Like, I feel bad. Legitimately. I'm sorry. It sucks if you want something and you can't get it, but you also just got to understand the situation.
I also feel like, and I don't know. I'll just put this out there and see what people think, is like, you want a console so badly, a $500 console, right? Comes out in November. It's now May. Still can't find one. If you have the money to buy this console, isn't it at this point worth the $200 or $250 to just go buy it on eBay? I mean, like, if you can afford to wait this long to buy the console, why not just pay the 50% markup if it is so important to you to get one? Otherwise, be fine with the PS4 because it's a wonderful console with games still coming out. There's going to be PS4 games for many years still coming out.
You're getting the new Horizon.
Fuck you guys. You're ruining Horizon for us, amongst other games. So, although, as I've said, Horizon did start as a PS4 game. It conclusively, I can tell you 100% PS4 or Horizon 2 was a PS4 game first. So it's not that catastrophic. But there's one last issue I wanted to bring up here. Manny Times Over wrote into us. Said, hi, Colin and team. First time Patreon here. With regards to the new Wired article, do you think Sony recognizes the nature of how IGN or traditional gaming websites have changed to become more of news aggregators and news distributors now? Could Sony be thinking that they could have a better story from Wired more in line with their PR messaging and to a wider audience in print and digital? The news will, in any case, be regurgitated by the rest of the traditional games media on their sites and YouTube. Would love to hear your and the team's thoughts on this. Love and much admiration from India. Thank you, Manny. So, and stay safe out, by the way. I know India's in bad shape right now.
Yeah.
So, I feel like I'm so confused why they keep going to Wired. I don't understand. They might have an affinity for the writer there. I can't remember his name, but it is weird to keep going to this publication. I don't mean to be mean. I know that Wired is a legacy publication. I was a little kid in the 90s reading Wired. It was like an amazing magazine, a futuristic magazine of all these things you couldn't afford and couldn't believe. But Wired is irrelevant today. And I would argue Wired has been irrelevant for a long time. And I continue to be... It's not necessarily you want to go to IGN, because they are regurgitating everything. And they never gave this kind of news to IGN. Even when I was there, like the big hits, they would go to Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or whatever. I am just, Chris, so puzzled by this fascination they have with Wired. You'll remember this is like the third or fourth time Wired has had a scoop of major proportions on PlayStation 5. This is probably the most minor one, but remember, PS5 was first mentioned in a Wired article. That Wired was the first group to see a PS5 game running. They saw Spider-Man loading. They did all these things. What is it about this publication, do you think, Chris?
I really have no idea. I honestly, like, I can't imagine anything other than, like, they know each other. Like, there's got to be, like, some people there who just like, oh, I know you. I know Jim from Wired. He's good. Let's give it to him. I really can't imagine anything else because everything you said is just accurate. You know, like, I have never once voluntarily gone to Wired. It's usually just, oh, there's a Wired article that's of significant value. I guess I'll read it.
Right. Or just read someone else's synopsis of it, which is what I actually read. I don't mean to be rude. I'm not trying to be rude. Like, because I'm looking, Wired as of 2017, so who knows what it is now, had a monthly circulation of 870,000. That's a lot of people getting a magazine. I can't imagine that it's that high now, and I've also never really known anyone to go to Wired.com. Dustin, what do you think about this fascination with them? I'm just so confused. You would think that they would want to... Let me back up. Sony and other PR companies would often go from place to place to make everyone feel wanted. I do think that Manny has an interesting point where they don't seem to give a fuck about giving IGN or Kotaku or GameSpot or anyone their exclusives, because it used to be like kind of split up. You guys play Knack, you guys get Killzone, you guys get Resogun, you all go at the same time, that kind of stuff. They don't seem to be very interested in that anymore, and I wonder if it's because they want the gravitas of Wired or they want the gravitas of something else, and there is no gravitas with IGN. And we use gravitas in quotes, of course.
So, I don't know how to say this. I don't want it to sound like an accusation against Wired. I can only speak to my own and other people's experience with Sony PR. But Sony PR likes people who are willing to play ball by their rules.
Definitely. That's why they don't talk to us.
That's why they don't talk to us.
Yep.
I've had other experiences unrelated to Last Stand Media that I've noticed this with Sony PR. I've heard stories of developers where this is the case. Sony PR wants it done their way. And I'm not saying that they're like corrupt, like they're only giving games out to people that give it 10 out of 10. I'm not saying that, because obviously there is fairness to an extent, but we know Sony they know the power they hold, and they use that to their advantage, and maybe fairly rightfully so. Maybe that's in their best interest to do that. So I think there's a lot of elements. There's the prestige element. There's, I don't know, maybe there's some of that, maybe not. I don't know. I don't want it to sound like an accusation. I don't know this writer at Wired. I barely even know Wired as a publication. Like literally the only time I've probably been there in the last 5 years is because of these articles. So it's not an accusation. I just want to be clear, but that's just some hypothesis of what our experience with Sony PR is.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. Actually, I don't know. There's so many stories I can tell. I'm just starting to tell them now because I don't even care. When infamous Festival of Blood came out, So the Infamous 2 DLC. We got it early, and I beat it in 90 minutes. And this was in the review. I beat the game in 90 minutes. And they disputed, both at Sucker Punch and Sony, that I beat it in 90 minutes. And we had to show them the trophies, which are time-stamped. You'll guess it. 90 minutes apart. Exactly. And that was the kind of shit we had to do to tell. They literally did not believe that we beat the game in that time. And I'm like, here are the trophies that are 90 minutes apart. Like, are you nuts? Like, you're contesting us on all these random things. They annoy the fuck out of me. I'm so glad that I don't have to deal with them. I'm sorry. And a lot of people, I mean, I hear from them. A lot of people in the first party listen to this show. Big developers, people on the publishing side. I love you guys. You're great. But the PR team sucks. Everyone knows that. Everyone has a problem with them internally. Everyone has a problem with them externally. They're not pleasant. They're not easy to work with. They don't think their shit stinks. Everyone knows that. Well, that's a long-held and obvious thing about Sony PR.
What Jaffe said, a little tidbit from your conversation with him, was about how he would do interviews and there'd be a PR person there. He'd watch the interview, and then what Jaffe said is the PR guy was like, "Oh, I'm gonna stick around for a little bit and talk to the reporter."
Just to clean
and Jaffe's like, "I know what's going on here.
Right.
Like, I know exactly what's going on."
Yeah. What happens in those situations? I mean, I've been in situations where people have said things to me, and I'm like, "No, I'm publishing it." But there have been times where they're like, listen, please don't publish that. In return, we'll give you access to this, and this later on. And sometimes you do make that deal. And that happens in journalism all the time because it gives you more access later. You often get that story out anyway. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. You know what? The piece of news out of that Jaffe interview, that it's behind a paywall, so I know that people haven't probably picked it up. But he said that Scott Rohde, who listens to the show, who's the head of the American first-party teams, said that Drawn to Death failed in part because of the liberal games media. And I was surprised to hear Jaffe say that. Rohde doesn't usually speak out publicly. And that's a pretty substantial piece of news. He's right below Scott Rohde. So I thought that was, I'm sorry, right below Herman Hulst. So I thought that was an interesting little thing as well. But go check out the interview with Jaffe. It was a lot of fun. Let's see. All right, let's move on to the second piece of news, boys. As we promised, we were going to visit VR today. Number 2, a substantial report from website UploadVR gives us some fresh news on PlayStation VR 2, which Sony has confirmed is in development, but which they've said precious little about, other than showing us those new futuristic controls, which are pretty cool. People haven't seen them. So here's what UploadVR's sources told them about PSVR 2, those sources being in game development, and they were briefed by Sony on the device. The total resolution of the eyewear will be 4,000 by 2040, or 2,000 by 2040 per eye. The site says, quote, a lens separation adjustment dial and I think it's gap tracking capable of foveated rendering, end quote, are included, and quote, a motor in the headset can be used by developers to give direct haptic feedback, end quote. So we kind of knew that already, which I think sounds cool. The device will include a lone USB-C port, which will be on the front of the device. And as noted, cameras on the headset will track the controllers in player position, so there's no camera plugged into your console anymore. We knew that from Sony as well. So just a few new details here. Well, what do you think, Chris, about especially the resolution? I really feel like that's a big step up. 2000 by 2040 is better than 1080, right? So not too bad per eye.
Yeah, I think I was reading that it's what is it? It's a little bit better than the Oculus 2, right? The Oculus Quest 2. I think
Quest 2.
Yeah, the resolution on that's a little bit lower. Which and I think the resolution on Oculus Quest 2 is like perfectly fine. Like it's beyond like what I would need anyway. So the fact that it's going to be better than that is pretty cool. This is great news. Like, assuming it seems like they're really going all out on this. The lack of camera necessity is a pretty big deal. Making VR as simple and quick to play as possible is like the key to making it
essential.
It's so central to making it worth trying. Like I had a Vive for like ages, and even that was just like setting up Steam VR and like you have your base stations that are just always drilled into the fucking wall, and it was so tedious that even though I knew it was super powerful and super fun, I never wanted to do it. And then I got the Quest while I was in New York, and it was just like, oh, this is so simple and quick and easy that it's like, before the Quest, I didn't think that like VR could be something, or VR was going to be like a thing that normal people would ever like hang out in the living room to do with their families or anything. But now I totally see that. And if they can tap into that in any way, then they've got a pretty winning machine here, and this is pretty good news. This is cool.
Dustin, what's your feeling on, your hype level on PSVR 2 with what scan information we have, the controllers, the haptics, the no camera, now we know the resolution, we know the USB-C port is on the front of the unit, which I think is actually weird. When you think about it, I don't know exactly what that's going to be.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it going to come out like this? Why wouldn't it come out like this?
I don't even know why that's all that... I guess maybe so you can, like, play it while it's charging without it kind of falling.
Yeah, that might be true.
Because the VR, I know the Vive, and I think the PSVR as well, has the wire kind of coming down on the back. And it
there might not be any good solution for this. As long as it's wired. Yeah, pardon the pun. Dustin, what is your feeling on VR so far? PSVR 2.
Something to remember is that the original PSVR, you're looking at 960 by 1080 per eye. So if you're coming from the original PSVR and you've not used any other VR headsets, the jump in quality is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. One of the big things in VR that affects the overall experience is the field of view. So that's something that I almost care about field of view more than resolution because it gives you that full, look around.
Like the panorama or whatever. Yeah.
Right. So that's huge. But another thing, it's the foveated, I never know how to say that, rendering. But if we, believe this article here, which it sounds pretty reliable, that the PSVR 2 having eye tracking. So basically what that does, to my understanding, when I looked through some of the info on this, is that it can tell where you're looking within the game. And so it's able to do better, super, what's the word I'm looking for? Super resolution. It's able to do the downscale and really focus in.
Dynamic resolution?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're able to get a lot more processing power because it knows where you're looking. So it's he's not looking over there. So we don't need to have that be extra crispy at this moment. And the other thing is,
that's really smart.
Eye tracking can also work when you have an avatar in VR, and so your character in the world, their eyes will move like yours does, which sounds a little creepy, but apparently it's pretty immersive when you're talking to somebody and their eyes move and blink naturally like that person is. So, dude, I'm telling you, PlayStation Home, it's coming back.
I don't even think I understand that. So you'd be talking to somebody in Mass Effect and their eyes are just mimicking yours entirely? That seems weird.
No, if we're all in VR right now, we're doing a VR episode of Sacred
VR
Symbols.
Chat.
I would see you as you are. Yeah.
We would see Chris's eyeballs darting around, blinking, whatever.
Tweaking out.
So yeah, lots of interesting tech in this. It's very exciting.
Yeah, cool. It's funny too because the eye tracking thing is interesting because Sony has been messing around with eye tracking for a really long time. At GDC in 2012, maybe, I played Infamous 2 on PlayStation 3 with a PlayStation Eye toy, and it replaced the left analog stick. No, the right analog stick. So what would happen was, and it worked, and this was 10 years ago. So what happened was you would move locomotion with the left stick, but I would look at the screen where I wanted to look, and it would just pan that way. So it removed the entire right, the total function of the right stick, so that you would just have your hand on the. Now this was something Dr. Richard Marks was doing. He created PlayStation Move and all that. I think he's out now, but this could be the embryonic. That could have been the embryonic thing of what we're going to see now, because it really did work. I remember playing and being like, "This is kind of nuts." I mean, you have to kind of override your brain and not use the right stick. But it really was I was in a battle where I was just looking where I wanted to look, and Cole would just face that way. And so all you had to do was run him around and strafe. It was pretty interesting. Peyton Stone wrote into us on Patreon. He says, hey, CDC. With the recent news on PSVR 2, I was curious what your hype levels are for the next iteration of VR for the PlayStation. It sounds like it truly will be a big leap overall, which leads me to my follow-up question on if we will see an increase in first-party support from Sony. Appreciate you guys keeping the symbol sacred. We talked about that second question already. I just want to very quickly bounce off of both of you. Chris, hype level. 1 to 10 for PSVR, 10 being the highest.
I'd say a solid. I'd say it's a solid 7 from a tech perspective. I think I want to see the device in action, obviously, and because that's going to determine whether or not I'm super over the moon about it. But everything that I'm hearing about it on paper sounds awesome. Like, this seems like exactly what PSVR needs to be. And if they can get support from, their first party in this endeavor, specifically with Insomniac, and even if they can get... Listen, man, if they can get Half-Life Alyx, it's done. Like, it's a done. Like, that's huge. That's huge... obviously not...
Yeah.
Not confirmed or even... I don't know. Who knows?
It seems like that's in the cards, man. I don't, because to your point earlier, Chris, like, what else could Gabe Newell even be talking about? Right. They don't publish games,
right?
So yeah, it's
I don't know, man.
Yeah,
we'll forward to it.
I am too, and it is interesting, not only for like the first party possibilities from Insomniac, obviously, but also like getting Gran Turismo running in VR stably would be huge. And also Sony London has a lot of experience there, so they should be able to pull. I mean, even something maybe from Japan Studio would be exciting. But Dustin, what's your excitement level 1 to 10 for PSVR 2?
Strong 8,
wow.
Maybe even a light 9.
Wow, that's really exciting.
Just because I've used the PSVR quite a bit. Its shortcomings are so apparent now, and everything about this new device just feels like they're getting it right so far. The resolution, the inside-out tracking, the lack of the camera, and stuff like that. It just feels like it's all coming together. And, most importantly, connected to the power of the PlayStation 5. Quest is great. I love Quest, and I'm always going to want to play certain games on a wireless device. You can't play a game like Half-Life Alyx on a Quest without a PC or something like that. So, I love those big AAA VR experiences. I want more of them.
Nice. Yeah, it's good to see your excitement. My excitement is probably somewhere in the 5 to 6 range, primarily because of what I'm going to read next, but also because they need to make me a believer. But Dr. Mo wrote into us and said, "Hey, CDC, first of all, Colin, you recently explained how you researched the news for the show, and I want to thank you for demystifying this process. It never occurred to me how much time you put into preparing for each show." Yeah, dude, my Wednesdays are pretty much dedicated to writing the show. My question is regarding PlayStation support for VR. You often mention the future of VR is outside of gaming, and I agree with you. Why doesn't PlayStation support VR outside of games? They could partner with a musician to hold a concert through PSVR, or partner with a museum to allow you to tour exhibits virtually, which I would fucking love. There are so many possibilities. This would be a cool way to start investing in PSVR outside of gaming. So this is something I've been saying from the very beginning, since before PSVR even launched, that Sony must get involved in entertainment and education and just experiential stuff. I keep saying like it would be an obvious thing when SpaceX goes to Mars in the coming years if they just drop a bunch of 3D cameras on the surface of the planet and you can just see it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't a thing that they do, especially with such a technologically forward company like that. But being able to see concerts front row, being able to go to a museum, I love going to museums. I love museums, and I remember going to the Getty in LA, which is a famous art museum, and I got so close to a painting of a bowl of fruit with flies on it. I was like, from like the 1600s, I was like staring at it and I got yelled at. So now I can just do that without getting yelled at. I can just get right up close to the painting. So my excitement is only half for the games, because the games are exciting, but I really feel like this thing is going to become an it device when they can finally show the 90% of it that we've not seen yet. And I think that's non-gaming. And I think it's okay, because I think it's very similar to like your PC. We don't really play games on PC. I mean, everyone plays a game on PC sometimes. We grew up playing, Oregon Trail or whatever the case might be. And sometimes you jump into Steam or you play a browser game, but it's your PC. You use it for many things. And I think that PSVR or just VR generally needs to, to embrace that. I would gladly pay $100 to see 311 in VR with my headphones on. I can be in front of any of the members of the band. Maybe I can be behind the band or whatever. Perfect sound, and I'm there. I would pay twice as much to do that than I would go to see them live, even though I love seeing live music. It's convenient. So that's kind of why I'm a little skeptical. Chris, do you feel like it's as important as I do that they get away from non-gaming stuff? And I hope that I think it's so important that when Sony announces PSVR 2 properly, they will have many applications ready to show that will not be games. That's my prediction. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong in the sense that I do think the future of VR is experiential. But I wonder whether or not that is important to Sony given, they are the PlayStation. It's one thing for all of the other like industry, like people at like the people at Oculus and the people at like Valve making like the Index and they're kind of like doing all this experimental stuff and with Valve's like insane amount of money, they can afford to do these like really weird experiential things. Even when we're talking about video games, like the reason why we talk about Half-Life Alyx so much, even though this is a PlayStation podcast, is Valve is in a unique position where they don't have to worry about money, so they can put AAA resources into a game that has a very low install base for the tech and still kind of get away with it as if nothing happened. And I think it's those companies, the risk of the companies that don't even need to calculate things because there are no risks, essentially, that are going to be at the forefront of experiential tech. And I think Sony would be wise to get in on that, but I don't think it's necessary. I think they're really just in it for the games, and I think probably for now, I think they kind of should be.
Fair enough.
There's not enough in it for them at the current moment for them to start doing like PlayStation music. I don't even know how they would even sell that on the PSN. Like you pay PlayStation like a fee for a concert ticket. You know what I mean? Like
you would assume it would be a third party, right? Like,
right.
Not that I would want to deal with this company in particular, but like a Ticketmaster, right? Where it's like we have a Ticketmaster app that you download, and then maybe you can watch concerts 1080p or 4K flat. Maybe there's some sort of PSVR functionality. Sony gets 30% of all ticket sales. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, Dustin, what are your thoughts on this?
I think you're partially onto something, because I think that we've seen Oculus invest heavily in these types of things. They'll do free concerts and they've done stuff like that. But really think that the ace in the hole here with VR is social, for sure. And maybe those go hand in hand. Like maybe you and a friend can go to a concert together, but
two people screaming at each other in their VR headsets because they can't hear each other over the music.
Yeah,
right. Or silent house.
Yeah.
But
that's awesome.
No, I feel like we talked about this, so I don't want to go over it too much again, but like we've seen the explosion of something like, one end we have VR chat, or whether it's Rec Room or whatever, and Facebook we've seen like really push this. So I'm curious, again, like I said, how those two things come together. Colin, what I was thinking, here's what you need to do. You talked about touring a museum in VR. I know you're not interested in other platforms, but if you bought a Quest 2 and downloaded Google Earth, I don't know if we'd ever see you again. Because I have spent hours in Google Earth VR where I'm like, oh, what's going on at the Louvre right now? Let's go check that out. And you usually can, like, if it's mapped in Google Earth, you can view it in VR. I've spent hours in simply, or I can be like, hey, I remember when I was on vacation in this spot. Let's go look what's going on.
That's wild to be able to just go down. Yeah, that is wild.
Dude,
that's
street,
so crazy.
Google Earth VR is insane. Like and it's free.
It would probably really tickle my nostalgia. I'd probably get so sad. Yeah,
you just get
I just go to like my old childhood house and like my schools and
you see nothing but rubble.
Yeah, dude, I'm telling you, Colin, it would be worth the price of admission just for the headset for you. I think, because you'd be lost. You can anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
you can view in VR.
The Quest is also just good tech, genuinely. But
maybe I will pick it up.
No, that stuff is really cool. I'm really excited at the prospect of where we're going to be. You mentioned Facebook talking about VR. I almost burst out laughing because I remember. Do you remember when Zuckerberg was doing that? Like he had his like. It was like an Xbox avatar of him, and he was like hanging out in Puerto Rico, and it's like, wow, you could really see the devastation. It's like I'm here. And it was just like the most tone-deaf thing you've ever seen.
Dude, so there's something up with
that's the hurricane.
I love it.
Have you guys seen the clip where he's like smoking meats, and he's like, I'm here smoking some meats.
Oh, yeah.
Get the Sweet Baby Rays. And like,
I'm
it's
going
a super
to apply the Sweet Baby Rays.
And we're applying the Sweet Baby Rays. Oh, we got to get, like, he says Sweet Baby Rays like 40 times in the matter of a few minutes.
He's
a fucking pod.
He definitely is. Do you know that famous picture of him on the jet ski with the white he has like white paint on his, or it's like, he has like sunscreen all over his face, and it's like the weirdest picture of him. It's like a famous picture of him. And then, and so he was on vacation, and I was reading about it recently, and he said that the reason he did that, because everyone's like, why the fuck did you do that to your face? And he's like, I thought it would stop people from recognizing me. I'm like, you're so dumb. You went to Harvard?
That's the most, yeah, right? That's like the most attention-grabbing thing you could, it's like, who's that man who looks as if he's a ghost?
Yeah, who's that mime on the jet ski?
A jet skiing mime is the most distracting thing you could possibly conjure.
They're somehow actually gliding across the water, but there's no jet ski.
Yeah, right.
Like, holy shit.
He's a true mime.
Next level mime.
All right, let's move on. Number 3. I hate mimes. A lot of French things really frustrate and scare me. Finally, your pleas have been answered. Sony is releasing not one, but 2 new DualSense color schemes, the very first made available to PlayStation 5 gamers, apart from your standard white controller. The 2 colors are known as Midnight Black and Cosmic Red. Midnight Black is what many people have been asking for. A totally black DualSense, black sticks, black triggers, black buttons. I've been told once you go black, you never go back. It looks great. The more interesting option, however, is the almost purplish Cosmic Red, which is unlike any official controller color we've seen before. You can order the controllers now directly from Sony, probably from other places too, for $74.99 each, and they're set to launch on June 11th. Chris, do you care?
Yeah, man. I love that red.
Yeah, it looks cool.
Crimson on it. It looks so good. I will say though, man, maybe it's just me. I miss the blue X and like the purplish square and the green triangle and the red circle. Like I miss those colors in just the general profile of the controller, but these are cool looking, man. Like the black one looks nostalgic. Even though it's like a new controller, it just looks like, oh man, it just feels like the PlayStation 2 when you're looking at it.
Yeah, it's a nice way for them. First of all, $75 for controllers. Again, I mean, these are more technologically advanced, but they're not so much. I remember back in the day, like you would kind of SNES controllers and stuff. You just kind of buy. They were like $20 each. It didn't really matter. These things are getting a little more expensive now, but I'm down. I mean, I actually was hoping, Dustin, that we would get a gray one. To Chris's point, like a gray controller with the color buttons would be cool, but maybe we'll get that in the future. I'm sure we will. What do you think about these 2 options for now?
Yeah, I pre-ordered the black one because I never bought a second one at launch because I knew that some different varieties were coming. So I pre-ordered that and the dock. Because, man, that DualSense is dying all the time. Yeah. So
I have like my phone charger. Sometimes I plug in the USB-C cord and charge it off of that. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I'm excited. They look nice. I think it's really dumb they charge an extra $5 for the red one.
Do they really?
I'm pretty sure they're two different. Let me look. I've got the links up here. So on Amazon.
So the prices are a little different.
The black one is $70. The red is $75.
Yeah, that's lame.
Dude,
I wonder if it's like something to do with. I'm sure it's nothing to do with anything.
I hate that.
Yeah, me too. So I'm not going to get either of these. I have 2 white controllers because I have 2 consoles, but actually we have 3 now because we have 3 consoles because Michael lives here now. But these are not the colors I want yet. Eventually, we're going to get to a point where I'm going to start buying controller. Like there are so many PS4 controllers that I ended up buying. The really slick looking blue one, the Islanders looking one, the Jets looking one, and please God, let us customize some controllers. Jesus. Yeah. I would customize a Sacred Symbols controller in 2 seconds, and I would pay good money for it. So, God damn it, let us do it.
Yeah, it's a shame that Xbox is really the only company doing that right now. Because I think, well, I guess the Joy-Cons would be a little weird to. That's more complicated tech, I guess. But, and I guess theoretically so is this. But I don't know.
It should be
that whole the design lab thing in general is just really cool, and like I would be making. I would be bankrupt. Like I would be broke. I would have nothing but my controllers. I see it like Smaug lying on his pile of customized DualSenses.
Yeah, I would. I'm the same way. I mean, there's just so many controllers I can think of where I'm like, oh, I would put a logo on this. I love this. I'd put a 311 logo on this. I'd put a Jets logo. I mean, I would have like a million controllers. So it almost is better, but. The on-demand stuff, it should cost a premium. They should figure it out. It's like if you want a custom controller, it's going to cost you $100 or more. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be. You don't have to buy it, but
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I would do it for sure. All right, this is an interesting piece of news. I think in a typical week, this might have actually been the number 1 piece of news, but this is an interesting one. Number 4. In a juicy tidbit leaked out of the ongoing Epic Games versus Apple litigation that we've been referencing in recent weeks on this show, Epic apparently offered the sum of $200 million to Sony for anywhere from 4 to 6 PlayStation exclusive games. So this is for the Epic Game Store. Word comes by way of website gamesindustry.biz, which cites a document called Individual Tactics written by someone at Epic in September of 2020. In support of its beleaguered Epic Game Store, Epic notes it's, quote unquote, awaiting feedback on a $200 million offer for unspecified first-party titles from Sony. Interestingly, Epic notes that Microsoft's interactions have been colder. The document states that, quote, their PC Game Pass leader is against what we're doing, and they are effectively bidding against us for content, end quote. On Nintendo, they say that they've not even started the conversation, referring to them as a moonshot. Quote, corporate history says this is a non-starter, end quote. What's perhaps most interesting, however, is the timing of this. Sony, as we now know, owns roughly 3% of Epic, which was purchased in 2 rounds. The first round, worth $250 million, or about 1.4% of the company, was garnered in the summer of 2020. This conversation happened after that, when Epic was basically willing to give almost all of that money back in return for up to half a dozen Sony exclusives. But you'll remember that Sony made another $200 million buy, nearly doubling its holding of Epic just last month, meaning that after that offer was made, Sony gave to Epic the same exact amount of money they were originally seeking. It's possible Epic and Sony have a deal that's yet to been sussed out, and it's worth noting that Sony has released a few second-party games, most notably Predator Hunting Grounds, on Epic Game Store. However, it remains much more keen on Steam, where both Horizon Zero Dawn and Days Gone have landed in the last year. So a few pieces of interesting news here, but Chris, let's start with you. What do you think? Sony and Epic, $200 million deal. Seems like it wasn't taken. Epic would get 4 to 6 unspecified first-party games in return for that money. This happened after Sony had invested $250 million. So basically what Epic was going to do was to say, like, take most of the money back, give us 4 to 6 games, and you will retain 1.4% of the company for free, basically. What's even funnier is that Sony then seems to have said no and then actually invested the money they were going to get into Epic. So $450 million in total. What do you make of this tidbit, this piece of news that we would have otherwise never seen or heard of if not for the Apple litigation?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'm business-minded or business-oriented enough to really dig deep into this, but it feels weird to me that Sony, just as a layman, it seems weird to me that Sony would invest that much money in Epic and then release their big things on Steam. That's the most confusing part of this to me, as somebody who like has no business background at all. It's just like, it seems like a weird thing to do.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't sync up. I mean, it's definitely a move of aggression on Epic's part. I mean, that's a lot of money because that's basically free money. I mean, at that point, Sony would be like, well, you don't have anything to make on any of these games anymore. I mean, it also could be that the games were going to be ported by Epic. We don't really know all the details yet, but Dustin, what do you make of this potential?
I think it just shows that Sony's interest in Epic is not in their PC store.
No,
it goes. I think it's. I mean, I think yeah, like you said, the engine seems to be a big aspect in their partnership with Fortnite and now Rocket League. Clearly, Epic has an eye for these free-to-play titles that just generate billions of dollars. So, yeah, I mean, I'm curious about. I don't know the stats about, you know, releasing on Epic Game Store initially and then Steam afterwards, because that's what we've seen over and over with them buying those exclusive rights. I wonder if Sony's like, yeah, that's not the move. We're already experimenting by releasing on PC. Let's not take it a step further by releasing it on not, you know, the leading storefront. So I can kind of see that, but yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah, the scuttlebutt is that Epic offered Sony about as much money as they gave to Gearbox for Borderlands 3. And people were like, how can that be possible? And I'm like, because we don't know what games were going to be included. I mean, this could have literally been Killzone and Infamous and shit, like old games. We don't really know in which no money would be made. But it is a kind of a baller move to say, like, no, we don't want your money. We're going to give you the exact amount of money you asked for instead. And somehow they made that deal. Very interesting. Yeah. So Sony owns about 3% of Epic. It's worth noting Tim Sweeney still retains a controlling share of 50% plus one of the company, which is nuts. I can't believe he hasn't sold yet. I don't have any idea how this man hasn't sold. And remember, before he sold 40% of the company to Tencent, he owned all of it. So I don't know. Tim Sweeney's low-key one of the richest people in the world. I don't think people realize that.
Yeah.
But he is. All right. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on all of that, but clearly Sony and Epic are simpatico. Number 5. There's good news for Yakuza fans, as the franchise has suddenly exploded in popularity in recent years. By the way, this happened right after we recorded the last episode, so it's a little bit of old news, but let's talk about it. The newest game, Lost Judgment, which was leaked a week ago or so, is real. It's due out on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 on September 24th, and is a direct sequel to the Yakuza spin-off game Judgment, which came to Western PS4s in 2019 and PS5 just last month. As an action-adventure title, Lost Judgment is very much its own thing, which is notable, since Sega also confirmed that the more mainline Yakuza games will continue to morph into turn-based role-playing games. According to a report on Kotaku, the creator of Yakuza, Toshihiro Nagoshi, noted on a live stream in part, quote, "The Yakuza series has been transformed into a turn-based RPG. On the other hand, over the years, Ryu Ga Gotoku, I can never say that name, studio, has accumulated resources and know-how of making flashy and exhilarating action games that are effortless to enjoy. We decided we should let our signature action gameplay live on through Lost Judgment," end quote. Yakuza Like a Dragon, the 8th core game in the Yakuza series, launched on PS4 in 2020 and came to Western PS5s a couple of months ago. I was shocked by this, Dustin. I don't know. I mean, is this as shocking as it seems? I mean, they're basically changing the mainline Yakuza games permanently and then making what used to be Yakuza into the side games. Am I understanding this right?
Yeah, no, that's what's happening. The reasoning is interesting, and I'm wondering if it goes beyond just our perspective in, as Americans on this side, right? Because I'm curious about what the Japanese response to changing it to an RPG. I'm wondering if that was like a really good move after, there's so many Yakuza games and they went for so long as these action, beat 'em up type games. And so that change was maybe really refreshing to fans of that series. So I saw some people here that were disappointed to hear that, but to my understanding, I mean, Judgment is different than Yakuza, and it's also not. Like, it has a lot of the same qualities. I already saw in Judgment, or in Lost Judgment, there was like karaoke stuff where like the main characters sing karaoke, and it's all very crazy, very Japanese, weird stuff going on. So I don't know. I feel like it's a move that makes sense to me as far as diversifying their content and their IPs. But I don't have a gauge on what the two separate fan bases think. The English, we'll say as a broad term, fan base, and then the Japanese. These are Japanese games through and through for a Japanese market. So I'm thinking that's what they're following. Yeah,
you could be right. Although it is interesting that Yakuza has always had an audience in Japan, but has exploded in popularity globally because of its Western market. So they're making a very Japanese-centric move in a time when the games actually seem to have been becoming more popular in the West. I wonder how that's going to work. Chris, do you have anything to say about this?
I haven't dived into any Yakuza games, so I'm totally... This is all super alien to me. I do know that it was a big boon to the series in general when they put all those games on Game Pass. I do. That's how I know a lot of people that I know started playing it.
Yeah, it was big because these games were also locked to PlayStation for a long time. So
yeah.
So now they have, and Sega's very keen on getting everything everywhere now. It's obvious. So
yeah. No, it seems like an interesting change, and I guess we'll see how that plays out. But I have so little knowledge on this.
Yeah, me too. I mean, generally speaking, I will be interested in how the next one sells whenever it comes out. Not the Lost Judgment, but the continuation of the mainline Yakuza games. Number 6, publisher/developer Capcom is doing great. Word comes by way of its recent financial statements representing the period from March 31st of 2020 through March 31st of 2021. In that period of time, Capcom's net sales were up 16.8% year over year, with a staggering 51.6% up year over year in their total profits. For that period, their biggest sales success came from Monster Hunter Rise, which isn't on PlayStation. Not yet. I don't know if it ever will be. As well as Resident Evil 3 Remake, launched last spring on PS4, and persistent success of Monster Hunter World and its Iceborne expansion, also available on PS4. Capcom sees year-over-year growth in revenue and profit of the current year, which is good, which it notes would represent 5 consecutive years of all-time profit year over year, and they're off to a good start. The publisher also revealed that its newest offering, Resident Evil Village, has surpassed 3 million copies sold after coming to both PS4 and PS5, as well as elsewhere on May 7th. Its predecessor, Resident Evil 7, sits at 8.5 million units sold. Fellow Japanese publishers Konami and Bandai Namco also released fiscal year statements, though not quite as dramatic. Bandai Namco's sales are up more than 19% year over year, with profits up 7.5%. They sold 41.4 million games during the fiscal year. Konami, on the other hand, saw a 3.7% increase in revenue with an 18% year-on-year increase in their profit. Not surprisingly, according to GamesIndustry.biz, their money moved almost entirely through mobile games. That is going to change, apparently. We're going to find out soon if that's really true or not, but it seems like the rumors are Konami's starting to gear up. Number 7, Ubisoft appears ready to roll into a new phase of its existence, and it's causing some confusion, enough so that the corporate entity has since clarified its original stated stances. During an investment call, as reported on by numerous sources, Ubisoft's CFO, Frederic Duguay, said the following in part, quote, "We are moving on from our prior comment regarding releasing 3 to 4 premium AAAs per year. It is no longer a proper indication of our value creation dynamics," end quote. What a bunch of nonsense, by the way. As such, they are putting more into, quote, "building high-end free-to-play games to be trending toward AAA ambitions." I'm sorry, I'm going to read that again. As such, they are putting more into, quote, "building high-end free-to-play games to be trending towards AAA ambitions over the long term," end quote. Man, it's such French English. This caused sufficient concern that in a statement provided to GamesIndustry.biz, Ubisoft stated in part, quote, "Our intention is to deliver a diverse lineup of games that players will love across all platforms. We are excited to be investing more in free-to-play experiences. However, we want to clarify that does not mean reducing our AAA offering. Our aim is to continue to deliver premium experiences to players, such as Far Cry 6, Rainbow Six Quarantine, Riders Republic, and Skull and Bones, to name a few, while also expanding our free-to-play portfolio and strengthening our brands to reach even more players," end quote. It's worth noting that Skull and Bones, Ubisoft's long-in-development ship combat game that was revealed way back at E3 in 2017, has been delayed multiple times, and it's mentioned in that clarification. It won't come out until after spring of 2022 now. So that game was revealed 5 years ago and still hasn't come out. Now, Remington Wilson wrote into us and said, "First time, long time. I have been following you since Beyond, Colin, and I'm writing in for the very first time. With the recent news coming out of EA's investor meetings that they had, and this is, of course, with Ubisoft, that they're going to focus more on free-to-play games and less on AAA games, something I can't wrap my head around is how these large publishers like EA, Ubisoft, etc., think it's a good idea to focus less on larger single-player games and more on free-to-play live service projects. How is it that normies like you and I know this is not going to work in such a crowded space, but these billion-dollar companies think it's a good idea? Does Ubisoft not remember Hyperscape? Maybe 100 people still play that game." It's an interesting situation here, Chris. Ubisoft said what they said, and then they felt like they needed to come out and clarify it, which they did. But I thought they're interesting. I thought what the CFO was saying was very interesting. They see where their bread's being buttered, and also their competitors. It's one thing to put $200 million into a game with marketing and development of like Assassin's Creed, and then you make $300 million. And so you make $100 million in gross revenue or whatever, or gross profit, which is great. That's just an example, by the way. But it's even better if you spend $20 million just a year consistently maintaining a game and adding things to it, and then make $1 billion off of it. I mean, to me, it seems pretty obvious why they take these risks, because even if they fail 4 out of 5 times, the one success will still make them more profit than their AAA games did. So, I mean, do you feel like Remington is on the right track here, or do you think this is right for UB and EA and others to pursue?
I think it makes sense. The business realities are the realities. I think the only thing that it's just so annoying because he mentions Hyperscape and how like that bombed, and that's the thing with Hyperscape is like Hyperscape was good. And it's still like just totally flopped. So it's like it just feels like a total random chant. Like it's just you're just throwing shit at the wall and like hoping things stick. And it's because they're so cheap to make in comparison, it's not that much of a big deal if most of them fail. And I get that. I understand that free to play makes a ton of money because microtransactions are a thing and people just can't control their fucking spending habits. But the big thing that I took away from this is, so Splinter Cell is dead. It is dead. It's on the fucking curb. They've stomped it into a paste. It's gone. And I remember a bright-eyed, optimistic Colin was like, "Surely soon."
Yeah,
no way.
I guess not. I mean, I think you're right, Chris. I think you're right. I mean, because they did. Now it's worth noting in the clarification they're bringing up games that they've already announced, right? So
Right.
it's fair
That's
to
true.
say that there might be something amiss, but I think you're generally right. If what they're saying is they're moving away from 3 to 4 AAAs a year, which the CFO did say, then that eliminates lots of avenues for these games to come out. It's not to say that they're not going to come out anymore. It's just to say, Riders Republic looks pretty cool if you're into that sort of thing, but it's not what most people want out of Ubisoft. Dustin, I'm wondering what you think of this move, not only from Ubi, but from EA. I mean, EA announced that they're doing a similar thing, making a similar movement. They did talk about how Battlefield 6 is coming and it's going to be cross-gen and all that kind of stuff, which was funny because they were like, it's a next-gen experience on PS4. I'm like, okay. So what do you make about this kind of move? I just feel like it's a math equation. I mean, it is literally a math equation, but I think it is a numbers game in such that they can have a few failures, but if they hit that one, it's not even Fortnite or Apex Legends. If you hit like that one Brawlhalla or something, or that one Genshin Impact or whatever, some smaller but very valuable game, you're smitten and you can run for a long time on that. So do you think that that's part of the calculus?
Oh, that's definitely part of it. I mean, they're looking, like you said, at their competitors. They're looking at EA and Apex Legends, or they're looking at Fortnite or whatever, and they're like, man, it would be probably really nice to have one of those.
Yeah, because they don't have any of those. Ubisoft doesn't have any of those big
right.
games.
And I'm curious about what the budget was behind Hyperscape, because I mean, I played it and it was fine. It wasn't, nothing about it was terribly offensive to me, but I did not want to continue playing it. So you got to wonder, like, if, like you said, they can invest enough and maybe have a couple of these fail, but as soon as you get the right one that hooks in, then you're looking at $1 billion, maybe a few $1 billion. Who knows? With the success of Fortnite, like, the sky's really the limit. So I could see them being willing to experiment, but I think there's also a very valid point, is that the market is crowded. It might be a little late, but who knows? We've been saying that, but then there's like certain games fade away. Fortnite certainly is, I mean, it's still huge. It's not what it once was. Certain games fade away, other games rise up and fade away once again. So if they can hit the right market with the right game at the right time, they might be onto something. As much as we, as the we'll call ourselves core gamers, whatever, don't like this idea. Like you said, it's a numbers game.
Yeah, I also feel like it's quite notable. I mean, it's a good point. Ubisoft is one of its. I was really the only publisher of its kind without anything like this. I mean, Activision has Call of Duty, and Epic has Fortnite, and EA has Apex Legends. So like they look at their competitors and they're like, shit, we need to. It's an astute point. So we'll see how it all plays out for them. But I was very happy to see no mention of Assassin's Creed, which is good. But there is more Ubisoft news. Number 8. There's some unequivocally good news for Ubisoft, however, and it comes in the form of The Division. The franchise is doing it great, and it's expanding, according to a press release from the publisher. The biggest news is that The Division is getting, you guessed it, a free-to-play game. It's called The Division Heartland, and it'll be on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, as well as elsewhere by the end of Ubisoft's fiscal year, about a year from now. What's most interesting, however, is who's leading development. The seldom discussed Ubisoft studio, Red Storm. In fact, their last two games, 2016's Werewolves Within and 2017's Star Trek Bridge Crew, were both VR titles. However, the studio has a long heritage with Ubisoft, having been in the family for more than 20 years. Astute and knowledgeable gamers will know that Ubisoft's long-running foray into Tom Clancy began with Red Storm's work, particularly with 1998's Rainbow Six, which was ported to PS1 in 1999. The other less expected but very welcome news is that The Division 2, first launched in 2019, is going to get another major expansion, this time in late 2021. The game received a 3-part DLC pack set in Washington, D.C., and a major expansion called Warlords of New York, the latter of which launched in 2020. So Ubisoft's first foray is going to be The Division, it seems like. I'm going to play it. I mean, I love The Division. I'm interested to see what I've never really played free-to-play games before. It's not like a market for me. So, Chris, what do you think about them marching forward, not only with The Division, they're going to support The Division 2 with more paid DLC, and they're bringing Red Storm, who no one ever talks about anymore. I mean, Red Storm Entertainment is an old Ubisoft team, but they don't really get talked about anymore, and they don't really make their own games, and they haven't for a long time. So there's a lot of interesting stuff here. But what do you think about the Division going free to play?
I think it's cool. I think that's probably the best avenue they have. The Division is without a doubt their most successful foray into this persistent multiplayer space. And removing the pay barrier is a pretty good way to get it in front of people, and I think the Division is good. I wonder if this free to play version or whatever the hell, because this is a new game, right? This isn't like
it's called.
just
It seems like a new game. It's called Heartland. So my assumption is it's going to be in the middle of the U.S. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm curious. I wonder if it'll play as good. I wonder if you'll feel the free.
like you're playing a massive game. I mean, because people have been making the point, which is true. Red Storm is a support studio. They're very much like Raven was or is for Activision. Like they work on everything, so they do know how the Division works. I'm pretty sure they actually made the DLC. So and not massive the Washington DLC. So I'm super excited about this. Dustin, what do you think about the likelihood that something like the Division works in free to play? Hey, I'll note this, by the way. It seemed like Ubisoft knew they were going to do this. Remember that they were charging $2 for the Division at one time, and people were just scooping it up. They were trying to get people involved, and it's clear that was part of the plan. So, and of course, they wanted to tease Warlords in New York and anything. But Dustin, do you think the Division Heartland has a chance?
I think it does. I'm a little confused by it in that I feel like the logical thing to me on the outside, because I played the Division 2 a little bit, but I'm not involved at all anymore. The move to me would have been to make the Division 2 free to play, like Destiny 2, and then start figuring out how to monetize that to a very broad audience. So having another studio come in and do a separate thing seems a little odd to me, but the thing with a lot of these free-to-play games, and why I think a lot of people had a bad taste in their mouth, is a lot of them were budget. They were budget because they were free and they were a risk. It's not really the case anymore with these free-to-play games. Like Warzone is AAA. Apex, very AAA feeling. Like these are quality games that are free. And even to a lesser extent, and I think that's why Genshin Impact did really well. People were very surprised with the quality of the game and how much it gave you for free, and that eventually convinced them to spend money. So, if the budget's there and the game is good, then I don't see why it wouldn't be right. Again, it's just the strategy seems weird to me, but maybe there's stuff we don't know.
Yeah.
My assumption about this, because like you said, Destiny 2 became free to play after being a charge game, which Chris knows well. My assumption is because it's the same team that's making Destiny 2 all the way through. Massive is clearly not making the Division anymore. I mean, they've moved on. They're making, let's not forget, Massive, which is a Swedish studio Ubisoft owns that made the Division. They're making a Star Wars game and an Avatar game.
Yeah.
So, and that Avatar game has been in development forever. So they're off Division, I think. And I think the Division is now being given to Red Storm. So I think that is part of it, is that they're saying, like, this isn't even a Red Storm game. Let's start again with a new game. Have Massive or whoever supporting them release the last DLC for the paid game, and then we can split them up. And I assume that is the goal. Because my assumption is that it wouldn't be quite as seamless as Destiny doing that, because it's not the same team. So people are going to be like, we kind of got ripped off here. Like Red Storm is making, I think that must have something to do with it, is my assumption.
That seems like a fair. Massive is making an Avatar game?
Yeah, they've been making an Avatar game for a long time.
Wait, the Blue People Avatar,
yeah,
right?
the Blue People. Yeah, it's supposed to go with the new movies.
Oh, that's upsetting.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Because you said that, and I was like, oh, like The Last Airbender?
No, they're making a blue person, like, Spielberg Avatar game.
Yeah, I got happy for a second, because that sounds really cool. Like a third person, like a bending game by Massive. That sounds fucking sick. But then I remember that there's a Blue People Avatar.
Yes, there is.
It has like 8 sequels that are apparently
all coming up. I've never seen the first one, so I don't even know.
I remember
what it is.
I left the theater, and I was like, "Why?" That was the big question. I left the theater. I was like, "What is happening?"
Well, it was supposed to be like some sort of technologically advanced movie, right? Where it was supposed to be impressive.
It was groundbreaking 3D.
3D, okay.
Right.
And CG.
Great.
In fairness, the CG was very good. In fairness. But that movie sucks.
Yep.
Let's move on.
Let's move on. A little bit more business to get into. Number 9, publisher THQ Nordic has acquired 3 new teams to add to its expansive roster of studios. According to website GamesIndustry.biz, those studios are Appeal, Massive Mini Team, I always love the name of that team, and Kaiko, all smaller teams that THQ Nordic has worked with before. Appeal is a little-known Belgian team that primarily makes smaller and more casual games, though THQ Nordic apparently has them working on an open-world title currently. Massive Mini Team is a German team that makes smaller titles. They refer to themselves as an indie game maker on their site, while Kaiko is perhaps the most notable of the bunch. Also from Germany, this team has been working closely with THQ Nordic on its various remasters, including the recently released Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning, as well as re-releases in the Red Faction and Darksider series. THQ Nordic, which is part of the much larger Embracer Group, now owns 19 teams. Embracer Group itself is up to a staggering 60 teams. So I don't even know how you manage 60 teams. I don't know. This is what I've been saying about Microsoft probably not being able to manage 30. I manage a THQ Nordic, or not THQ Nordic, but Embracer managing 60. How do you manage 60 teams?
You just go like, hey man, you go, which one of you guys can make Red Faction remastered?
As someone raises their hand and then they're like, you do that.
Yeah, it's it's like, that sounds cool.
Oof. Well, welcome to the team, everyone. Especially Massive Mini Team. I always love great studio names. It's a great name.
Yeah.
Number 10. If you're a Lucasfilm Games fan, then you may be excited to know that 2 of their classic games are launching for PlayStation 4 next month. Indeed, both Zombies Ate My Neighbors and its sequel Ghoul Patrol are launching together on PS4 on June 29th. The ports are being handled by French publisher Dotemu, who we've been talking about a lot recently as they were behind 2020's awesome throwback brawler Streets of Rage 4. The other interesting piece of this from a business standpoint is that Lucasfilm Games, known for most of its existence as LucasArts, is now owned by Disney. Thus, this $14.99 package, this $14.99 package, is being done with their blessing, which is cool. The original Zombie Ate My Neighbors came to SNES and Genesis in 1993. The action game was followed by a sequel, Ghoul Patrol, which came only to SNES, as I remember, in 1994. I thought this was really interesting, Chris. Not because of the games. The games are great, but this is what we were talking about earlier about big companies being willing to make little amounts of money. Disney has nothing to gain from this at all. Nothing. They couldn't give a fuck less about this, probably. They make no money on this. They're what are you going to make, like $500,000 or something in profit? But they're doing it anyway. And that's the sign of a cool company. I don't like Disney very much, but I thought that was kind of nice. When I saw that, I'm like, wow, they're working to do cool stuff that won't necessarily net them tons of profit, which is the antithesis of what we were just talking about.
Yeah, that's fair. I still think it's more likely that it's just like somebody going up to them, it's like, hey, can we do this? And the guy's like, what is it? And then they tell him what it is. It's like, I guess. Yeah, go ahead. I don't think we're going to pull this spiky-haired kid from Zombies Ate My Neighbors into the MCU anytime soon.
Yeah, so that's true. Yeah, we don't have to worry about retconning Ghoul Patrol. Dustin, I saw you smile about it. You're familiar with these games?
Yes.
Nice.
This was one of my youngest gaming memories on the Sega Genesis. This is one of the games I had. I was terrible at it. I couldn't believe how hard it was. I would sometimes... I think the first level was in like the neighborhood, like a yard. And the second one is at night. And eventually there's a mall or a store. Mm-hmm. Never got past the store. But what was weird is that I've always known about Zombies Ate My Neighbors, and I've always had a soft spot for that game. I had no idea there was a sequel. I had no idea.
Well, it wasn't on Genesis. I mean, as I remember, it wasn't on Genesis, so you wouldn't have played it. It was a late SNES game. I think I rented that one. I rented them both. But I was looking at gameplay, like old, long play stuff, not the stuff from the new trailer, and I'm like, these games are great. Like, I can't wait to play. And I think $14.99 is such a nice price, so... June 29th, Zombies Ate My Neighbors and Ghoul Patrol. Number 11. As it does each month, Sony has revealed the best-selling digital games on PlayStation Store, this time for the month of April 2021. These were PlayStation 5's 20 best-selling games for the month in order. So here are the 20 best-selling PS5 games for that month. MLB The Show 21, Outriders, Returnal, Mortal Kombat 11, It Takes Two, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, FIFA 21. Miles Morales, NBA 2K21, Madden NFL 21, Avengers, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Disco Elysium, Hitman 3, Demon's Souls, Borderlands 3, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, Godfall, No Man's Sky, and Rainbow Six Siege. Godfall being on there, there's nothing else to play. Over on PlayStation 4, you get a little bit of a better taste on what people are actually playing. All right, so here are the 20 best-selling games for the month on PlayStation Store for PS4. MLB The Show 21, Grand Theft Auto 5, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, Outriders, Mortal Kombat 11, Minecraft, NBA 2K21, Ark Survival Evolved, Naruto to Boruto, Shinobi Striker. I know when people hate when I say that. Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, Injustice 2, PGA Tour 2K21, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, It Takes Two, Nier Replicant, Ultimate Ninja Storm 4, Red Dead Redemption 2, UFC 4, Mortal Kombat XL, and Gang Beasts. PSVR's top 10 best-selling games for the month were in order: Beat Saber, Superhot VR, Job Simulator, Creed Rise to Glory, The Walking Dead Onslaught, Gorn, Skyrim, Doom 3, Arizona Sunshine, and Alvo VR. Call of Duty Warzone, Fortnite, Rocket League, Apex Legends, and Destiny 2 were both PS4's and PS5's most popular free-to-play games. Sony likewise noted through its developer Naughty Dog, if you want another piece of interesting sales data, that Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, which launched on PlayStation 4 in the spring of 2016, so 5 years ago, has been played by an astounding 37 million players. So not that many copies sold. It's obviously was given away for free a couple of times, but congratulations to Naughty Dog for an amazing player base. The one thing I wanted to say here, I'm sure we have nothing much to say about it, but two things actually. Returnal, a little weak. It was only on the chart for a few days, but usually even an exclusive game charting for a few days brings it to the top when it's an exclusive. So maybe selling a little bit soft. But the other thing that I wanted to note is Disco Elysium charted, which is cool. I'm going to give that game a go soon, I think. And like we said, Godfall. I think it's a little weird, though. There are a few things here, Chris, that, like, they haven't ported Minecraft yet. Like, I know they haven't, but when I see it on the PS4 chart, I'm like, why isn't Minecraft on PS5? Do you think that... I don't know if anyone even has anything to say about this, but I'm like, why isn't Minecraft on PS5 yet? What?
Is it not?
I don't think so.
It's
It's not in the top 20, so it would be weird, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it is. I mean, I would know that, I think.
I guess I haven't seen it in the store either. That's interesting.
Well,
maybe because what were you gonna say, Dustin?
I don't think it's out on Series X. I don't think there's a port for that, like a specialized Series X. I think they're working on it because they want to do a ray tracing version.
Right.
So.
Right. Oh man, that's weird.
Well, whatever.
I assume because it's the PS4 version.
Yeah.
Like, because you can still play Minecraft on PS5.
Yeah, of course. But that's what I was saying. Like, when you
so-
see the PS4, I feel like the PS4 sales are more interesting because it's like that's a big player base. So, like, they still want Grand Theft Auto, right? They still want Minecraft. When you're on PS5 and you have nothing to play, that's when shit like Godfall starts charting. So that's the only point. I wasn't even trying to insult Godfall, but that was just the point I was making, where the PS4 list is just much more useful to us right now. But shout out to two other games. MLB The Show, killing, still, not a huge surprise, even though it's on Game Pass now. And Outriders seems to have done really well, even though it was on Game Pass. So congratulations to everyone involved. Just a couple more things to get through, boys. Number 12, here's an unusual story we typically only mention in passing in the news wrap-up. Sniper Ghost Warrior, Contracts 2. Sniper Geist Warrior. We used to, on Podcast Beyond, call, what was it, Siphon Filter? No, Cypher Filton was what we used to call. So I'll read it again. Here's an unusual story we typically only mention in passing in the news wrap-up. Sniper Ghost Warrior Contracts 2, the upcoming title from CI Games, has been delayed on PlayStation 5, according to a posting on the developer's official social media feeds. Why is this interesting? Because the delay is only for PS5, doesn't affect any other consoles, including PlayStation 4, and is apparently due to, quote, unforeseen technical issues that we've only recently discovered, end quote, according to their statement in part. This is unusual because the game doesn't appear to have gone gold yet, and is also far off enough that the team needs more than a few weeks to fix the unknown console-specific issue. So it'll be interesting if we ever hear what went wrong. However, CI Games is releasing its first DLC for all player bases as a make good for free, and is allowing PS4 players to upgrade to the PS5 version for free when the native version launches at an unknown date. The game comes to PS4 on June 4th. Polish studio CI Games is best known for its Sniper Ghost Warrior series and is otherwise primarily focused on the casual and puzzle spaces. The original Ghost Warrior came to PS3 in 2011. It was on Xbox 360 in 2010. And the original Contract spin-off launched on PS4 in 2019. The reason I wanted to read this, Dustin, was specifically because I was thinking about Ben with Returnal. And I was wondering, like, you don't often see this, where one console version is going to be delayed, and the game's not gold, so they can still try and fix it before they manufacture it. I was wondering, just conspiratorially, I was like, is there something up with some of these games on PS5? Like, I just couldn't help but make that connection with Returnal. Do you think there's anything there?
There's no question that the PS5 is less stable than the Series X by a long shot, because we've seen a lot more problems in regards to crashing and your whole library getting fucked up and needing to like reset your console and stuff like that. This is an interesting thing, though. I'm curious what that would be that they would catch so late. It's very intriguing.
I have no idea. Do you have any insight, Chris?
I think it's just interesting. I think you're right, Dustin, that like in my experience, having both machines and using both machines, I have noticed that the PS5 is a little bit it's a little bit more prone to accidents. I noticed this specifically when my roommate Sweeney and I were both playing through Cyberpunk, and he had the PS5 version. I had it on Series X, and I remember I had, I think, 2 crashes in the entire time that I was playing, and I beat it. Like, I finished Cyberpunk, and he got, I think, 10 plus, like 15, and then he just never finished it because it was like, it keeps crashing my machine. Fuck this.
It's very weird.
And it's like, it's just very interesting because hardware wise, they're not all that different. I know the PS5 has a very specific SSD, but you have to assume on some level that that's got to be the thing, right? Because that's the only big substantial difference between the two machines. I mean, sure, there's like littler component variations, but
this is going to sound ignorant as fuck, but
it's weird.
Let me say the ignorant thing, and you guys can correct me. Could it be that the SSD moves so quickly that it's like overloading the processing power of the PS5? In other words, like it's getting so much data streamed to it that maybe is that an ignorant thing to say? Like where they're not able, because like when Returnal locks up over and over again or crashes, I'm wondering, like, does that have something to do with the way the SSD is like that the game's not ready to render, or the game's not ready to, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Like our games loading faster than the rest of the machine can
right?
handle?
Like it's basically happening too quickly in the pipeline, and that PS5 versions need to be kind of more subtly tuned in order to deal with that. And maybe some of these developers, including second-party developers, are not quite realizing that yet. I know that I'm an idiot with technology, so don't judge me out there. But could that be it?
This, I don't know. I think this might have more to do with their engine, because this is something that they've caught specifically with the PS5 version before launch. And the thing with Returnal, that this is the kind of thing, it's like, I almost wish Returnal wasn't exclusive. You know?
Then
just so we could see.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'm so curious about, like, why... Because Returnal is, like, inconsistent, but apparently whatever the hell's going on with this is consistent enough to be like, okay, there's something very specific that we have to iron out. So it's not exactly the same. I think these, Returnal and this are 2 separate issues. But Sony very clearly needs to work on stabilizing this machine. Like, that is just true.
I'm looking here. This might be interesting. I don't know. The game runs on Crytek, so we'll have to tuck that into the back of our minds and see if future Crytek releases also have a problem, because I'm looking, and I could be wrong, but I think that's the first CryEngine game on PS5. I could be wrong. So that might have something to do with it too.
That would make sense.
Because
the remaster isn't on PS5?
What'd you say?
Is the remaster of Crysis on Crytek?
I thought that was a PS4 game. Let me see.
Is it? But it runs, right? It's technically Crytek running on PS5.
Yeah, it's Crytek is CryEngine 1. This is
right.
5.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so CryEngine 4 Sniper ran on, Rise of Summon and Roma ran on that too. And others, Homefront: The Revolution, Kingdom Come: Deliverance. The newer games now, though, that run on it are not games. Oh, no, right. I'm sorry. Crysis Remastered. Yeah, Crysis Remastered is on CryEngine 5 on PS4. So, right engine, wrong console. I bet you that is it. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
I don't know enough about this shit to really iron out, but
me neither. Just
I'm
something,
curious,
just something to tuck in the back of our minds for now. Sony has built a few of their second-party games on CryEngine in the past. Robinson: The Journey, the VR game, is on Crytek. Right. Also, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is on CryEngine.
Oh,
so
I didn't know.
There you go. More useless things Colin knows. Finally, number 13 is a wrap-up. Website Gamatsu reports open-world hunting game Open Country comes to PS4 on June 3rd. Shoot 'em Up Darius Burst Another Chronicles EX Plus comes to PS4 on June 11th. Shooter Curved Space comes to PS4 and PS5 on June 29th. Re-released Xbox Live Arcade game Toy Soldiers HD is coming to PS4 in August. Adventure game Hotel Transylvania Scary Tale Adventures comes to PS4 in October. And party game My Singing Monsters Playground comes to PS4 and PS5 in November. The website also reports that puzzle game Ever Forward has been delayed from June 29th and will now come to PS4 and PS5 on August 10th. Website Push Square reports Bus Simulator comes to PS4 on September 7th. And finally, website Polygon reports 2019 action game Remnant from the Ashes is getting a free PS4 to PS5 upgrade via patch. So that's very cool if you want to play that. I want to play that game.
I heard that game has a weird thing where it doesn't do 60. It
with
does
the patch.
4K 30, which is bizarre with the patch,
Yeah.
which is like
That's no good.
strange. I don't know if that's true.
Gross.
I remember seeing it in passing, being like really
Give us the
confused.
option. Why not give us the option? You know?
It's very weird. Don't get it.
All right, boys. Tradition dictates that we end every episode of Sacred Symbols with 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from the audience. Remember, by supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, you get early ad-free access to every episode of this show, the ability to submit your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas to the show. You can get your name in the credits. Access, of course, to Sacred Symbols Plus, our exclusives over there every week. So let's start here. I like this question from Kirk. It is short and sweet. All right? He says, hey, guys, just wanted to check in now on how we're feeling about Sony's future after all of the news these past couple of months. Still worried? More hopeful now? And so on. So, Chris, we've kind of ebbed and flowed with the motion of the ocean as we've gotten this news. How are you feeling about PlayStation 5 and Sony's prospects right now?
I want to take issue with the phrasing here.
Please.
At no point, I don't think I've ever been worried about Sony. You know what I mean? It's more just like, man, I wish they could just solve these obvious problems, like back compat. You know, like that's my main thing. It's like I've never been under the assumption that like, you know, Sony's just, oh man, one more fuck up like this and they're 1 foot in the grave. Like it's never been like a dire situation.
Down in the Confederacy.
It's just,
yeah.
That's for some reason it's the voice I chose. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a mix because I've played, you know, Returnal's out. It's a $70 game. I think it's very good. It's better than I was expecting, but it's horribly unstable. That is not the best sign going forward, especially with this price hike that everybody is just meant to just sort of hand wave away and just accept. The back compat is still an issue, and it will continue to be. And until they solve that, I'm probably not going to have anything nice to say on that front. But overall, I think Sony is in pretty good health. They've got a lot of games in development, obviously 25 apparently, which is crazy. You know, Ratchet looks great, assuming it functions, God willing. And, you know, I'm not worried. It's just there's criticisms, and I would like them to hear it so that they can improve.
Right.
You know.
Listen to this show, you dumb assholes. Dustin, why don't you tell me how you're feeling about this statement from Kirk?
So it's always funny to me because I've seen some of the feedback that we've been up and down, but we've always done our takes or whatever based on current information. A lot of people like to go to the episode where we were talking about the Schreier article and be like, "Oh, this aged like milk," and I'm like, "Do you say the caveman is stupid because he doesn't know how to use an iPhone?" Like, it's just like we're going off what we know at the time. That's what we do as commentators, right? It's like,
yeah, we're responding to news as it drops. So obviously, like if that news tends to be or it turns out to be like either misreported or something's off about it, then that's not our fault. We're relaying news to you. But you know, I don't know. The notion that we're worried, I think, is a bit overstated.
right?
You know?
And that's the thing is that, you know, the stuff in the Bloomberg article was worrying, and a lot of things we did not like. Sony has now, we talked about the Wired article, kind of clarified some things. That gives us confidence somewhat, or at least, you know, something to think about. But really, it comes down to, I think a lot of things come down to June and July. whenever they do this next thing, you know, we just got to say it as it is, how it comes. So, you know, we can be concerned about the future and say that the PS5 is doing really well at the same time. Those are two completely different trains of thought.
Sorry, by the way, I had to get up and bring Rush downstairs. But I wanted to just say about this issue that, and it's what you said, Dustin, I think you're totally right. People have to kind of have a little bit of sympathy, if you will, to the idea that people get into front of a microphone with the newest news and information they have, and then every week, time-stamped, they say what they mean, or what they feel, rather. And what they mean, of course. And then you kind of have to just judge that based on the kind of pipeline from show to show as we learn more information. And so it's kind of fun probably for some people, and for me personally, to think about like our ebbs and flows, our ups and downs, our peaks and valleys, how we feel based on the information we're getting in real time. So it's a good question from Kirk. And right now, I agree with Chris. Like, I was never worried. In fact, I've said many times that I think the most interesting PlayStation was the early to mid-tier or mid-generation PS3 PlayStation when they were losing. I think that was kind of the most exciting time to be a PlayStation fan, because it was like only the hardcore really stayed. And so like we rebuilt the culture from that point. But things seem much more stable, clearly are much more stable now. And am I hopeful? I'm optimistic. I don't know that I'm hopeful. I maybe this is kind of 6 of one and half dozen of the other. But to Chris's point, Kirk, I'm not worried. Sony was getting handled a little bit, and they've come out and managed it, which is the sign of a healthy company. So keep that in mind as well. You know, they saw the feedback. Some of it was, I think, very important. You know, Haven, for instance. You can even see the way they responded from Haven to, not Ember Lab, but whatever that new studio, Firewalk or whatever. Much different interviews. They made some of those guys available for some of these interviews and stuff. So they're figuring it out. And I do think, as we said earlier, this summer we're going to get a lot of clarity on PS5.
Yeah.
Traylon wrote into us and says, hey guys, puzzles. As I get older and older, I'm getting to that point in my life when I sit down and try get some gaming in, I want to have the smoothest, headacheless experience. That being said, how would you feel about a puzzle guide difficulty level choice added to games where it literally runs you through the puzzle? Honestly, at this point in my life, puzzles are my least favorite part of a lot of games out there, and I would love to be able to just breeze through them without spending too much time and thought. Thoughts? I love this. I mean, I think it was Tomb Raider, right, that had multiple difficulty settings for like combat and like environmental exploration and stuff. That was super cool. And the fact that you don't see that is strange, because we're in such a modular, accessibility driven culture now in games. But I also hate puzzles in games. And I've said many times, I don't play games to feel stupid. That's why there's enough in the world that makes me feel stupid. I don't need to like do, I read a physics textbook or look at a math equation and I feel stupid. So when I sit down and play a game, I don't want to feel stupid. I've never been good at puzzles. I don't have the mind. I'm sure I have the mind for them. I don't have the patience. I don't want to sit there. So when I play games, even new games, like with Resident Evil, for instance, I'll fuck around for a little while, but then I'm like, I'm looking this up. I'm not dealing with this. Like, this sucks. I don't want to sit here for a half an hour. And what frustrates me the most is what happened in Resident Evil when I looked it up, which was I was doing the right thing, and for some reason it just wasn't happening the way it was supposed to. And I'm like, oh, that annoys me even more, because I had it the first time. But Chris, what do you think about kind of modular puzzles and the idea of maybe shutting puzzles off? Or like, what purpose do they serve in gaming for you?
I'm not a big fan of puzzles either. Unless it's literally the point. Like if there are like point and click adventure games, for example, like I can't remember if Grim Fandango had any puzzles necessarily.
I was going to say Maniac Mansion. It's funny you said that. So it's a similar kind of game.
Yeah. But those games in general are just all about the puzzles. And like when I'm playing a game like that, I'm into it, and I'm like, all right, I'll deal with this, and I'll do this, and it'll be enjoyable. But after a certain amount of time, I'll spend like 10 minutes on a puzzle before I'm gonna be like, all right, I want to play the damn game. I'm gonna look this up. I don't care. My integrity as far as puzzles, I don't care.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I really don't.
I agree.
It's especially because, like you said, like the game makes you feel stupid, but it's not even like something you could have even. It's always like, oh, of course, I didn't like check the underside of the fish and take the glove out of its intestines so that I could touch the doorknob without getting fingerprints on it, and that was the key. And it's like, what the fuck?
I totally
How do you
agree. I mean, that's why adventure gaming always really annoyed me when I was a kid, and why I never got into them.
Yeah.
Because it was like, you need the key to this door, and then you go into the door, and then you have to find the light switch, and especially on PC, people might remember like PC, like adventure games like Police Quest or and stuff like that, where you'd have to type. So like you had to get like the exact phraseology right. It's like open locker, like. Get gun and shit like that, and like I'm not in.
Yeah, just the logical leaps in some of the puzzle designs in a lot of games just like really bother me to the point where it's just like I don't feel bad that I didn't figure this out. Like, because come on, but I think the modular difficulty that they had in Tomb Raider was really cool.
I love that. I thought it was really neat idea.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of it was like I could be. I think it was in Shadow of the Tomb Raider where it was like, I think it was like enemy strength and like AI intelligence, and like there was a bunch of shit that you can mess around with. So
it was pretty modular and really cool. And I think I haven't messed around with The Last of Us' settings, but I'm pretty sure The Last of Us also like doubled down on that too, where they really dialed in the customizability of just like the game experience all the way from AI to combat and all this other and stealth and all these other different avenues. And I think that's really cool and really great.
Me too.
Because another thing that came to mind was Spider-Man and those fucking stupid...
Oh, the little like chemistry puzzles?
That weren't even hard, but were just like, why are you making me do this?
I bet you they got feedback internally that they needed to add playtime. I mean, I think that's
was wild.
I would assume that was the case. Yeah.
You know what's great is those puzzles nowhere in Miles Morales, and it was great.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Skippable
Miles Morales
now,
is awesome. It's perfect length.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that for me it's always like, I guess it depends on the game, on how much of the game is it a puzzle game. To me, like Resident Evil, being able to have a guide, or like you guys said in Tomb Raider, makes perfect sense. But if it's a puzzle game, then it's kind of like, what's the
right? Like the
point?
Witness, for instance. That's why I never even played that game, because I'm like, there is no way that I even know how to play this. And therefore, I'm going to have to play it with a walkthrough. I mean, I was watching people play it, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I'm as smart as you think. Like, when people are out there like, you're so smart. I don't know about that.
It needs a puzzle game needs to be really good for me to really like I like puzzle games to some extent. Like Portal and Portal 2 are like amazing. Like they're, I think, like top tier puzzle games, like in my opinion, because like they are puzzle games. They're hard logic puzzles to figure out. But they're also like fun and fast and kind of like very interesting.
I feel like there's two, not to get too into the minutia of puzzles, but like there's two types. There's like, a game is presented, this is our style of puzzle, The Witness. You are drawing lines through some type of grid, and they introduce different dynamics. Or there's a game like Threes, which is like the best iPhone game ever. It's a game the only game I always keep installed. You understand, you're sliding and combining numbers. But then there's like Resident Evil, where it's like the puzzle, or not just Resident Evil, but other games where it's like the puzzle is variable in what it wants from you, right? And that's a little bit of a different skill set in that term. So I can definitely see there being... I'm totally fine with accessibility in that instance. Yeah. But again, you don't want to add, like, if it's a puzzle game, like that's the whole point.
Yeah.
The Witness. Don't demand accessibility for puzzles in The Witness. It's like asking for easy mode in Dark Souls. Like, it just that's not the point.
I agree. But like when I play Resident Evil, I'm not trying to like when I play a game like Resident Evil, I'm trying to like experience like a really weird story, and I'm trying to like get involved in the atmosphere of it.
Oh, yeah.
And like, soak in the scenery, like the detail. Like even just like, dude, when I was playing the demo, just like that game is amazing from a detail perspective.
Oh my God.
Graphically, it's beautiful.
It's incredible.
But I'm not playing it to like match dog heads, or like
test your metal, matching dog
yeah,
heads.
like.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean. Because I feel the same way, where I get this feeling. I was actually feeling it because I was running around like the castle in Resident Evil yesterday, and I was like not figuring out what I was lost to where I was supposed to go, and I get this feeling sometimes where I'm like, oh, like where I it's not something I visualize, like I verbalize or anything, but I'm like, I'm getting really mad. I almost don't want to play this anymore. I've always had that feeling where I just want to progress a little bit. I don't mind grinding. I don't mind challenging gameplay. of course. But yeah, it is an interesting thing to consider. And I like what you said, Dustin, too. Like, let's not concede that all games need this stuff. I think that just sometimes a game could use it. Like when people are like, why isn't Bloodborne or Demon's Souls more accessible? And I'm like, because that's not the game. You know, that's not the game. And I made that argument last week, Chris, about Returnal as well, where people are like, you know, they're afraid of, what is it, save scrubbing or whatever you call it. What is that?
Save scumming?
Scumming and all of that, and that's why they don't put it in. And I'm like, well, that's kind of what I kind of feel what they're saying from a design philosophy. So not every game needs to have these options, but it's good that some do and some explore them. And I say, Traylon, we keep them coming. Thank you for writing in. Adam Thum wrote in and said, hey, Funkmaster Colin, Stylebender Chris, and Drunk Fist Dustin. I don't want to get overly political with this statement, but I wanted to ask how the possibilities of inflation might affect the gaming industry and, in short, Sony overall. With their game prices going up as much as $10 USD, does this suddenly worry Sony a bit internally if we do suddenly have a crash? We're not going to have a crash. Microsoft's Game Pass deals, while not profitable now, surely seem to offer something to a community that might be looking to penny pinch more and more. I know you say video games are usually recession-proof, but there are lots of signs that are worrying right now. This is all hypothetical, but I'm interested to hear your insight on this. I have to say, I don't know what you guys have to say about this, but it's really interesting what's going on right now with inflation. Because we talk about how $70, the $10 price point, really was just eaten up by the inflation that already existed over the 10 years between the price increases to begin with. But what we're seeing now is inflation so severe in the United States, like 4, 5, 6% month over month, depending on the products you're buying, that the $10 increase is being eaten up by contemporary inflation. So the concern should actually be that Sony's not charging enough. Now, they're not going to raise the price again, I can guarantee you that. But they're probably there being like, fuck, we were doing this in order to extract more value from what we lost from our previous inflationary cycle. We did that. Now we're experiencing real-time inflation again, which we cannot adjust to. We can't adjust to it with our console. We can't adjust to it with the pricing of our games. And it's tough for all corporations right now. Inflation is a tax. It's not a tax that's active, but inflation is a tax. And as I was explaining to Micah, the unfortunate thing about inflation is that it hurts the poorest the most. It's something that big companies and people with money don't even worry about. If my eggs go up, or your eggs go up 5% month over month, you're not going to care. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're certainly going to care. So extrapolate that to a corporation in which their money is being, the cash that they have, the reserves they have, which Sony has billions of dollars in reserves, are being eaten away by the inflationary cycle, which is actually good news, Chris, because the one thing I was thinking about with this is that it's actually going to cause Sony to want to spend money, because the best way to get value during inflation is to buy things. So I was wondering, you know, and this is all hypothetical, we don't have to talk about it too much further, but I was wondering, like, will they buy studios now? Because if they hold their cash, they're losing value. They need to start buying things. It's what anyone with money does during inflationary cycles. You go buy real estate, you go make investments, because the cash itself just sitting there is whittling in value. Do you guys have anything to add about this, or I just wanted to throw that out there because I thought it was an interesting topic. Dustin?
I don't know if I have anything to add. I'm not surprised by the level. Again, he didn't want to make it political. I'm not surprised that inflation is going nuts right now.
Well, when you give people free money, I'm sorry, because I know he said he didn't want to get it political, but it is a political statement. I said this about universal basic income from the very beginning. It's why I think Andrew Yang's interesting, but why I just totally ignored him. Because if you just start printing money and putting money into the system, inflation takes over. We're seeing it in a very small way. So imagine if everyone was getting $1,000 a month forever, what inflation would be like. It's totally out of control, and it sucks. And it is a tax on lower and middle income people, unfortunately.
And beyond that too, you're talking about printing money, but the thing that's always been baffling to me is that, like, when Holly was on unemployment, they gave us her paycheck and an additional $600 every week, which was awesome because it was a lot of extra money. Not needed in any way. For some people, that would have been super beneficial, I'm sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did not need that money.
Well, but and people that don't need it put it away, typically, which doesn't also help inflation. So right.
So it's, I don't know, we're getting off track here.
We are, but it is interesting to note that, and this is where politics and gaming meet, and economics and gaming meet. Like, this is real. Think about the inflationary cycle on your own money, and then just extrapolate that to the size of a corporation and understand that they're probably like, God damn, dude, we just lost the whole increase basically on the game, and now we're back at square one, and we can't play that card again. You know, or we should have maybe waited to play the card and made the games $80 or something later, but they can't play the card again. So it is an interesting situation. We'll certainly keep an eye out on it, and yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about the extra money too, Dustin, is that yes, certainly some people needed it. Many people didn't. That's why you should means test stuff. First of all, everything should be means tested in the United States. Why would I receive that money? Why would you receive that money? Why would Chris receive that money? It doesn't really make any sense, but
you should be able to opt out of it.
Yeah,
It really would be.
well, but then you have to ask the question. It's like, why would you? I mean, it's, you know, like, why would you opt out of it? You are being.
I would have done it. Because like
I didn't get it because I actually made too much. But and I'm not trying to like, be an asshole, but I didn't get it. But I wouldn't have given it back. I would have been like, that's your penalty for being an asshole because I shouldn't have gotten this to begin with. Yeah. So I don't know.
Right.
It is a strange situation just from a political standpoint though, because there's just so much to manage on the global economy, manufacture, shipping.
Well, yeah, especially right now
and all that stuff. Huh?
Especially right now.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
when we're in the middle of you know, hopefully at the tail end of, you know, something that was devastating for a pretty long time, that don't mean to jinx it, but India's not looking great right now.
No.
And it's
Brazil too.
not all that. Yeah, it's not implausible that this happens again in the near future. So like, I mean, I don't know. It's going to be a weird situation where you're going to have to we're going to have to figure shit out.
It's going to be like The Road soon. It's going to be like a Cormac McCarthy novel in this place. But I just wanted to say too, just to Dustin's point about the extra money people are making, this is another inflationary drive because that money is convincing people not to go back to work at the old wages. So if you want to pay them more wages, which is fine if that's what way people feel, that's going to have another inflationary push and make things more expensive. So we are in a very tight pincer right now economically. It's very interesting. Like in the United States, I can't speak for other parts of the world, but the United States, we released our, it's May, so the April unemployment rate went up. That doesn't even make any sense. You know, like that doesn't make any sense. How many more people can be unemployed than were already unemployed? So a lot to discuss and a lot to consider. We'll move on. Nick Emery wrote in and said, howdy boys, long time listener. He says, I think the first time commenter, you can't remember. Nick, you got to stop. You got to lay off the weed, Nick. Now that EA has finally answered our prayers and given us a Mass Effect Trilogy remaster, what the hell is stopping them from delivering a Dead Space Trilogy remaster? I know Visceral doesn't exist anymore, but EA knows how beloved the franchise is and how many of us would want them to give it a new coat of paint. Why do they seem intent on letting Dead Space die? Glenn Schofield is working on a spiritual successor set in the PUBG universe, the Callisto Protocol. Could this game potentially bolster public interest in a remaster trilogy? Or will we never succumb to the power of the marker again? What do you think, Chris? I know you're a fan like I am of the franchise.
Yeah.
I feel like he kind of said it. I think we don't typically, I guess I'd have to go look, but we don't see collections from EA of studios that they've closed. I'd have to go back and look. Like, have they done anything with Maxis and anything? I don't think they have more recently. So that could be one of the things where we don't want to draw attention to a studio we shuttered, that everyone was mad that we shuttered, that was making a Star Wars game, by the way, that we canceled. So I think that might have something to do with it. I don't know that most people realize who Glenn Schofield is. I think you have to be a pretty people that listen to this podcast kind of person.
Yeah.
Glenn Schofield, of course, was the creator of Dead Space. But I don't know that the Callisto Protocol is going to be like this shot in the arm EA needs to revisit space horror.
Yeah.
Why do you think they stay away from doing this?
I mean, dude, I don't know why, but I mean, think about how long it took them to do this trilogy. And this was a trilogy in a series that they were still doing. You know, like they put out Mass Effect Andromeda and they're making another Mass Effect. And it took them until now, in 2021, to put out the trilogy. You know, like,
9
that's
years.
a long time. Yeah. That's a long time for a series that they're still working on. Dead Space, a series that they're not continuing, that they have no intention of continuing, apparently, and that they are only continuing in a spiritual sense. You know, I think that really answers everything. I don't think they... Unless there's going to be a Dead Space 4, you're not going to see a Dead Space remaster trilogy. I think that's safe to say.
if you do get it and they're just doing it out of the kindness of their own hearts, that's a miracle. And you should all just thank them for that. If that,
is
ever
a
happens,
small
that's
miracle.
like,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I don't see it happening. It sucks. Those are amazing games, and I would love to play them again, especially at with all the bells and whistles of modern hardware. Holy shit, dude!
No, I just
A ray traced Dead Space
Dead Space is
trilogy
so good, dude.
at 60 frames with 4K, dude. I'd be all over that. Even the third one, I didn't even like it.
I didn't play
But-
the third one. I didn't even play that one. It's
Yeah.
it's funny because I played the original Dead Space again for Knockback a year and a half ago for the first time since it came out, and it was awesome. I played it on PS3. It was just awesome. But Chris, do you think we'll get the Dead Space trilogy, or do you think is it more likely than the Saboteur remastered?
Wow.
I would love the Saboteur remastered.
Dustin, what do you think about what's going on here?
Yeah, I don't know. EA, I'm trying to remember in the back of my mind, years ago, they were like, yeah, we don't really want to do remasters. Is kind of the state, because a lot of people are asking for Mass Effect, but clearly they've changed their mind. Looking here on Google, they re-released Burnout Paradise, they did the Command and Conquer remaster.
Right.
Now they've done Mass Effect, so who knows? Maybe if they see
NHL
some money
94, by
there.
the way, also was re-released, a small one, but they really released
Yeah.
NHL 94, which was super cool to do.
Right. So, but I think Chris is right in the fact that unless they want to reinvest and try to bring back the franchise, I don't think they're going to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think people overestimate how big Dead Space was as well. Dead Space 3 especially, I don't think anyone cared about. It's very similar to Lost Planet with Capcom, where it's no one cares about this. It's like Metroid, frankly, where it's Metroid doesn't sell. I don't know how many times we have to say this over and over again. The fact that Nintendo still gives you Metroid games is unbelievable, since Animal Crossing has sold 3 times more than every Metroid game combined. It's pretty amazing that they give you any new Metroid games. But I agree. I love space horror. I think it's awesome. I just think that we have, the Callisto Protocol might be pretty cool. We'll see. I like Glenn Schofield. Of course, we have games like Alien Isolation and others. So we'll see. And even Tacoma was really cool. I loved that game, actually. I thought that was a really neat game. So we'll see. Nick, I loved where your mind's at. We would love to see more Dead Space, but it just doesn't seem like something EA does. And I think Mass Effect might have even been kind of an exception to the general rule. Like Dustin said, Command and Conquer and, like I said, NHL 94, but they're not going back. A publisher with the litany of games that they have would go back and re-release all of them. I mean, you have to understand that they own Naughty Dog games. They published Rings of Power on Genesis and shit. I'm not saying these are big games, but you would think you'd be we're just we have a Naughty Dog game. Let's just re-release it. You know?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But they don't.
It's fair.
Yeah.
It is fair to bring up those one-offs like Burnout Paradise. It could potentially be possible that if they have no intention of doing Dead Space again, you might see maybe a Dead Space 1.
That'd be cool. A
Maybe.
remake would be cool. A whole remake.
A remake of Dead Space 1. That would be cool. And that could be possible. That's definitely more likely than the trilogy, because no one cared about 3. 2 was good as well. But, I don't know. I liked Lost Planet,
Well, you would. Cameron Shaw wrote in and said, "Hi, guys."
It's got a grappling hook, in fairness.
Yes.
Yeah.
He says, "Hi, guys. Longtime listener from the UK. Would just like to hear your opinion on what you think the new Battlefield will be. I personally would like to see it set in the Vietnam War, but I feel like it would be a modern-day setting and probably not long away. And I think he's saying Bad Company 3 would probably do the Vietnam thing. I don't know that Bad Company 3 is ever going to happen. It's been 12 years since Bad Company 2. I don't know that that's going to happen. But, Chris, we know Battlefield 6 is going to come this fall. We know that it's a very Activision-like production for EA. I was reading that they have a bunch of teams working on it. So very much like Activision is tackling Call of Duty every year. Could be a sign of things to come. What do you... And like we said earlier, cross-gen this fall, where do you want it to be set?
I want a future Battlefield, man. It's been a long time. It's been such a long time since they've taken a crack at, futuristic shit, and, I just want that. I love Battlefield 1 a lot. I had a lot of fun with Battlefield 4. I think in all likelihood, what this next thing is going to be is probably something like 4. It's probably going to be modern, I would imagine. That seems to be the rotation that they're in right now. But I would love the Battlefield style of combat with the set dressing of sci-fi, and I feel like with modern hardware, I feel like that would be really cool.
Yeah, the destructibility would be awesome and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, just I don't even just the creativity that the future gives you as a license. It's just like really like it's cool, and I just wish they did more with that, and I wish they would just embrace that. But it looks like we're getting another modern Battlefield from everything that I've heard. But yeah, I don't know.
What do you want, Dustin?
I think I want what Chris doesn't want. I want the modern. Like I don't know. I always feel like I missed
4?
out. Yeah, I feel like I played some of 4, but it wasn't. I don't know. It didn't really grab me. But then I would see like gameplay videos and people. I'm like, oh, this does look really fun. Maybe I didn't give it enough of a chance. I think that's a huge benefit to them, because I think that if Call of Duty is doing World War II again this year, I think that is the wrong move. I think people are going to see a Call of Duty World War II game and say, no, thank you. So, and
That's
that's
like how many more stories? They just have to go somewhere else. World War II is so expansive. Like, we don't have enough of the island hopping in the Pacific or North Africa or whatever. Like, let's China, Korea. Right. Like, there's a bunch of places to go. Jesus, go somewhere else. I mean, because that's my problem is World War II is always Europe and the Nazis. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. I actually like that setting a lot. And there's a lot of storytelling to be told there, but let's give it a rest.
Yeah.
I wonder if World War II is one of the wars between that and World War I. They feel like they're safe because there's unanimously agree that World War II was just, right? If you start to go to other wars, so. Obviously we've talked about Fallujah so much in this show, but like, other wars like the Korean War or something like that, is that more of a contentious topic? We could talk about that though forever, but it's
it's a good point.
That's a. Yeah.
I feel you know what I want out of this. It's never going to happen, of course. I mean, you want to talk about contentious. Right now we're experiencing another kind of boiling point with Palestine and Israel, and a Battlefield game in the near future in which there is a full out war in Israel would be fucking dope. And
that'd be crazy.
Israel's been invaded many times by other countries simultaneously in the 40s, 50s, 60s. So, like, to have some sort of modern version of that where they're invaded in some sort of hypothetical story from Jordan and Iran and all these different places, Egypt, and they had to defend themselves, or you were playing whatever side, I think that would be really cool. You want to talk about contentious, holy fuck. Final inquiry comes from Badly Brave. He says, hey, CCD, now that RE Village and Returnal are both out, I'm seeing a lot of talk about game length. Village seems to be getting criticized for its length by a lot of reviewers, while Returnal is generally being praised for its gameplay loop and replayability despite its shorter length. What baffles me is that Village is also a game that's meant to be replayed with plenty of weapons, unlockables, challenges, and mercenaries mode as well. What's with the seeming double standard in the industry, and why is one being praised for something the other is neglected for? Personally, I prefer Village's loop, but that's just me. Stay safe and have a great week, guys. Thank you, Badly Brave, for writing in. Chris, what do you make about the kind of what he says are double standards between the judgment of game lengths between a horror game like Resident Evil Village being judged for being 8 to 10 hours long? I'm sure it's longer than that, by the way. It's definitely going to be longer than that for me. And a game like Returnal that just has this beat for beat, repeatable gameplay, and people are praising it for that. It is an interesting point, but I think they're two different games, so I think people's judgments are going to be different.
Yeah, I think in general the desire for insanely long games is confusing to me. I don't understand it. I want games to be shorter most of the time. I think some of my favorite games would have been some of my favorite games over the last couple of years would have benefited greatly from being like 30 to 40% shorter. I think just straight up. I think Red Dead 2 was phenomenal. I loved it. Best story I think I've ever seen in anything. It's so great. But that last whole 10 hours,
it's a third of the game.
You spend the last third of the game is like, I didn't need. It was cool that they gave it to me, but I really didn't need that. And same thing with Death Stranding, where they have you trek across America 5 times. I don't need that. Length is something I feel like too often we kind of equate length with value, and a game doesn't need to be like 500 hours long to be worth the $70 or $60 you spent on it. Returnal is like a roguelite. It's meant to be like, and in a lot of ways it fails at this, but like it's meant to be repeatably digestible. And Resident Evil is more like an entire experience that you can experience again in a different way. Or like with this other mode, apparently, this mercenary mode. I actually don't know anything about
mercenaries. I think it's
mode.
Kind of like what was going on in, what were those handheld Resident Evil games? Revelations? I think it's
yeah.
somewhat similar to that, and there's trophies attached to them, which sucks. So I probably will end up doing it.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to compare a roguelike to a horror game.
No, I
just don't.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
I agree with you, Chris. I totally feel the same. I mean, I love talking about this topic, Dustin, because game length is so important. It's an important topic. I mean, but I'm with Chris. Like, first of all, how long? Like, if you go to Power Picks or whatever, and you see how long a game is, it's never right for me. Like, it's never right when it says that a game is 10 hours long. It's definitely not 10 hours long. I'm not as bad as my brother who takes like 25 hours to beat a 10-hour game, but I never do things quickly. I assume Resident Evil 8 is going to take me somewhere in the 12 to 14 hour range, I think, when all is said and done, and I think that's perfect. I just think that's perfect. What do you think?
I think there's something that people forget about that's very important, and that is production value. And I guess different elements of production value, right? We were talking about Resident Evil 8, how beautiful it is. You walk into that room with the chandelier, and you feel like you've never seen anything look so beautiful in a game before, right? It's like, that's part of that price, is that level of production. You have all these characters, all the voice acting, the level of graphical fidelity, right? There's something to be said for that when you spend $60. Now, that production value in a different game may be focused somewhere else. The gameplay of Returnal, the what you're doing on a controller is more fun, right, than Resident Evil. I maybe not everyone would agree with that, but I think overall that's a consensus. But you don't just play a game for that. You play for story sometimes. Sometimes you play for atmosphere, right? So and I think you guys both touched on this, but we can't only limit that to length. It doesn't make sense. It's a huge disservice to the medium.
I love what you said. I think, Chris, you'll recall this. I think I coined the term during our Last of Us discussions, production per square inch. And I was talking about how like games are so dense with production that like it's hard to judge games. And I was saying that The Last of Us Part 2 is just so dense with production value that it's probably the densest production value game ever. And I stand by that. Resident Evil 8 is pretty close in a lot of ways. And I agree with what Dustin was saying, where I'm like just in rooms just looking at shit. And I also love just like, I've said this many times, but Resident Evil invokes in me that feeling of I'm in a space, I'm kind of being quiet, I'm slinking around. Maybe I find a bed here and I sleep on it. And there's like a room with a candle and some food. And I like kind of putting myself in that vibe and all of that. So you kind of take your time. I think it's all about Badly Brave, just kind of judging games as they come to you. But I agree with you that there is a little bit of a hypocrisy with the criticisms of the games or lack thereof. But just remember that we're talking about different games as well. If Returnal was any longer, I think it would definitely hurt it. And it's way longer than any Housemarque game. So we'll see. We'll continue to chronicle this. I'm really excited to talk more about Resident Evil once everyone's beaten it, and we can do like a really in-depth conversation because there's a lot to say about it. And Returnal as well, of course. All right, boys, we've been going for more than 3 hours. It's time to wrap this up. Ooh. Chris, you have any closing comments?
Well, I'm going to go get my second dose of 5G.
Nice. Excellent. I thought you were going to say you're going to eat.
It's going to be fun.
But
no.
Excellent. That's surprising. Well, good luck, and hopefully you get great connections when you get your shot. Dustin, any plans?
Any plans? No, I have a guest staying from out. Actually, we have multiple guests because Holly's friend from college is going to be here over the weekend. So I'm just kind of going to be floating around.
Sure.
If you've ever had, if you have a significant other or whatever, and they have guests, not that I'm not friends with Holly's friend, but it's not the same. So
yeah,
I'm
and they
just
also
gonna
probably
kinda
want
be,
their own time as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll be floating around,
cool,
playing some games, taking some time to myself while they do their thing.
That sounds great. That sounds wonderful. Well, I appreciate you guys today. Thank you for your time. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of our show. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, and all things Last Stand Media, Defining Duke, Sacred Symbols Plus, Knockback. Come join us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. Buy merch, laststandmedia.shop. Follow us on Twitter individually and as a company. Go follow us on Facebook. Come to Discord. Go to Reddit. There's a lot of things for you to do. YouTube, etc., and so on. We appreciate you. We thank you. We love you. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and Burbank, California, USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Chris Raygun Maldonado. Sacred Symbols' executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.